Over 20 years ago, Alex Jones created the media platform called InfoWars, and in the decades since, it's grown into a truly remarkable institution with over 200 radio affiliates, tens of millions of unique website visitors monthly, and a 24/7 live news TV channel broadcasting from state-of-the-art studios in Austin, Texas. InfoWars has become the most trusted independent news source in the country, dedicated to delivering breaking news, live coverage of special events, and exclusive reports you won't find anywhere else. While the old guard media struggles to maintain supremacy in a landscape rocked by innovation and technology, InfoWars has been at the forefront of the information revolution. From 8 million radio listeners, over 2 million YouTube subscribers, or the billions of views of our online content, InfoWars proves dominant in every facet of media we enter. For the hardest-hitting reports, uncompromising analysis, for high-profile interviews and bombshell revelations, accept no substitutes. Demand truth. Demand InfoWars. InfoWars. Tomorrow's news today.
There are times in history known as quickenings, where more happens in just a few years than happens in the previous 100. And with all the technology and the population of the earth exploding, most historical futurists and analysts, and I concur with them, believe, and have been proven right so far, that you're going to see these trends only accelerated further. So we're on the verge of a super quickening, a super turning. And that's something David Knight talks a lot about, the fourth turning we're going into, but I'm calling it the mega turning, the super turning. He's going to join us in the third segment in about 15 minutes. Paul Watson's joining us on the Brexit deal that makes England and the UK vassal slaves of the EU. Unbelievable tyranny. Total open borders to the Islamicists. It is incredible. So they're trying to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat on that. But May is set to be basically removed from office over that. Obviously, one of the big stories is that Trump is thrown down the gauntlet and said, there are more than 50,000 people that we've counted in all these different caravans. It was 2,000 a week ago in Tijuana, over the border from San Diego, California. Now it's 5,000. 10,000 are set to show up. It's estimated that within 2 weeks, there's going to be 50,000 people UN paid for with U.S. taxpayer money converging on the Tijuana border with the United States. And this is all being orchestrated with Democrat judges waiting on the other side to give them 2, 3, 4 years to show up for their immigration hearing on supposedly being political or religious refugees, which obviously they're not. And the media, it only shows us images of this one woman that looks like she hadn't missed any meals with her 2 kids that she's dragging into harm's way across thousands of miles, child endangerment, demanding, look, it's all women and children. But we've looked at the numbers. Over 90% are men. It's less than 10% are women and children. This is disgusting behavior. But all of that's on the back burner. We've got reporters being deployed right now to the heart of this. All of that is on the back burner because I happen to have done a little bit of studying on the geopolitical ramifications of what's happening in the EU, what's happening in Ukraine, what is happening in the surrounding areas. And 100%, the Ukrainian president, who's unpopular, just ran this stunt into Russian waters in a Russian port where they have treaties for 15 years, and treaties before that for several hundred, that when you enter the port, you radio the port pilots like it's done all over the world, from Japan to Mexico to the U.S. to Italy. When you come into the port, could be 12 miles, could be 10 miles, a few miles in, you see boats that come in and guide you. Harbor pilots is what they're called. And they've got machine guns on the fronts of their boat. It's called the Coast Guard. And the Russians have Coast Guard, we have Coast Guard. And if you came in to a shipping area and you came in your ships and you tried to go under the bridge into any of our international waters, into U.S. waters, and you didn't radio ahead and say who you were and didn't follow procedure, it would be worse than being rammed. You would be rammed, you would be shot up, you would be boarded, which is exactly what the Russians just did. It's cut and dry procedure, and it was all violated so that Poroshenko, or however you say his name, could declare martial law, which he just did about an hour ago. Stay with us. Well, it's official. What we told you 20-plus years ago is now admitted. There's not just human clones walking around. They are edited humanoids that aren't even human and don't even have the same number of chromosomes. I told you China was getting ready to announce it. It's been announced, ladies and gentlemen. And now you're going to see everything just start breaking. A world government system tracking everything you do, from smart toilets surveilling you to not being able to even have a job or buy groceries if you're not a good globalist. Total tyranny is here. Meanwhile, you have the UN funding giant invasion forces with debit cards and training and political operatives leading them, slamming 15 million in the last 6 years into Europe. Now you've got 50-plus thousand marching to meet the 5,000 already on the Tijuana, Mexico, U.S. San Diego border. Some of them actually made it through yesterday. 35 million illegals have already made it in the last 20 years into the United States. But many of those were actually looking for jobs. These people have been politically prepared, politically brainwashed, politically brought in to colonize the United States, and they're on record saying it. We have the treasonous, treacherous UN and Hillary and Barack Hussein Obama helping set all this up with Peter Sutherland and the Open Society Foundation of George Soros and others. It is an incredible time to be alive. And once you see this 50,000 make it in and overwhelm the courts, then even more will come by the millions until the whole country looks like the worst squalor you see in places like Paris and other areas of Europe that have been completely overrun. It is unbelievable, ladies and gentlemen. Again, we're a radio broadcast first and foremost, but we're multimedia. And so we also have a full TV production operation that's sent out on satellite to TV stations and cable systems, and that all of you can watch as well at InfoWars.com/show. And as you know, we're the most banned, most demonized, most attacked program in the world because we had over 6 billion views on YouTube conservatively, billions of views on Facebook, hundreds of radio and TV stations we still have, and we were raising the alarm over and over and over and over again about the globalist plan to implode the borders, about the secret human cloning programs, about the plan to attack the family, about the plan to attack the two genders, about the entire program through the vaccines and through other systems in the food and water to actually change our DNA and put binary weapons into our bodies so that the population can be forcibly reduced. And now, as private world government gets openly announced, and as all this unfolds, our credibility has shot straight up. So they first have to demonize us. They first have to lie about us. They first have to create something that InfoWars and Alex Jones aren't to set the precedent to begin not just our censorship and shutdown, but all of you. The globalists are formulaic, and they're making their move. And that's why it's so critical for all of you to be more involved and engaged than ever, because we've got a fighting chance to turn this around. But if we stand down and if we let this technocracy take over and we let these multinational corporations allied with the Chi-Coms take over, our children, but ourselves as well, this is now here, it's not coming, are facing a true dystopian future. Now, what just happened today in Ukraine is so incredibly dangerous And it's so obvious. And it's so transparent that it's sickening. And what gets worse is when you tune in to mainstream corporate media, even Fox News, none of it you're hearing is true. We know on record from the Ukrainian news and the Russian news exactly what's going on. We know that there is a Russian port that they've had for 500 years, and that they have treaties going back hundreds of years. And they signed another treaty in 2003 where Ukrainian vessels coming into the Russian port have to announce themselves and have a harbor pilot, Coast Guard, just like the U.S. does or any other modern country, bring you into port. Well, they sent in gunboats, and the Ukrainian Navy has said that they intend to blow up a bridge that the Russians have built there. And so the Russians simply came up, bumped the boats. They didn't stop. They had armed men on board, so they took them over. That is standard procedure, and it was done by the Ukrainians to violate standard procedure and law to create a pretext for the so-called president of the Ukraine, Poroshenko, to declare martial law, which he has now done. Here are the Russians on their loudspeaker and their Coast Guard telling them to pull over, telling them to announce themselves and communicate. Military tugboats with men on the deck with machine guns. When they don't do it, the Russians ram them to disable them and then board them. Our news is calling this an active war, and NATO is talking about military action against the Russians and starting a physical shooting war. This is what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. You know, the Russians don't have an illegal alien problem. They don't let the Islamists crash over their borders. Only Europe does that. You know, the Russians aren't teaching 5-year-old boys that they're really girls and vice versa. And coming up at the bottom of the hour, I'm going to go over the entire history of this. I'm going to break it all down. I'm going to show you the treaty. I'm going to show you the facts. Not conjecture. It's not siding with the Russians. It's siding with reality. That the Crimea is basically a peninsula sticking out from Russia. Let's put a map on screen. And there is just a tiny little area of water between Russia and Crimea. Russia started in Crimea about 600 years ago. That's like saying the U.S. started in Boston. And then you have Russia proper. They built a bridge across there to Crimea. The Ukrainian government wants to blow it up. They've said they are. And they come out of the larger sea into this bay that's always been Russian-held and has their main gas pipelines coming through and has their naval base there. And now here comes the military of Ukraine saying they intend hostilities in past years, violating a 2003 treaty in the Kerch Strait. And it's all there, coming right in to start a fight. So, last chance to stay in power, Ukrainian president signs decree on martial law. Oh, and you guessed it, suspending the elections. All a provocation. I'll break it all down, play all the videos, bottom of the hour. But I want to talk about this critical juncture in history we've reached with David Knight when we come back. Please don't forget, without you, we're not here. Plus, we have great products everybody needs. We are extending the biggest sales we've ever had from last week's Black Friday for a few more days, but it's got to end in a few days for Cyber Monday. And this may go for a couple days, but a lot of our best-selling items are very close to selling out. Store-wide free shipping, 50% off all InfoWars Life incredible supplements. That's Brain Force, that's X3, that's X2. That is all the best-selling products and double Patriot points for a few days more. Instead of 5% on each order towards your future purchase, it's 10%. Don't forget about signing up for auto ship, an additional 10% off. A lot of these are lost leaders. Take advantage of it and fund the InfoWar today at InfoWarsLife.com or InfoWarsStore.com to find the main site. We'll be right back. Poroshenko, the real dictator of the Ukraine, evidence shows he stole that election. The country's been in a civil war since Soros and the UN and NATO openly funded the overthrow of the elected government. Now they've tried to seize the Russian-controlled East that's always been Russian. All hell is breaking loose, and there is a port area that Russia's had for 500 years on its border, and there is a bridge going into the Russian territorial waters. They have a treaty, and now a bunch of gunboats pour through it under orders not to follow the orders of the Russians and the Russian Coast Guard. And so just like the U.S. Coast Guard did, they rammed them, took out their rudders, and boarded them. And now Poroshenko has declared martial law and is talking about suspending the elections because he's about to lose them. I'll cover all this in the next segment in great detail, but I wanted to get David Knight, who hosts the David Knight Show, 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., to pop in about a topic he covers a lot that I agree with historically, these turnings that happen at key points where the future course for the next 100 years or so is governed. And we see a global realignment against the tyranny of the globalists. We see huge awakenings, but we also see a lot of change, period, good and bad. Human cloning being announced. We already knew what's going on. World government being announced. Massive censorship being announced. The UN trying to smash borders, corporations, new kinds of warfare. All the AI, all of the social credit scores, tracking people. All hell's breaking loose. Everything we've been talking about for decades is now confirmed. And we know that this globalist system is a very authoritarian, very anti-human, very nasty group. And there's a global race by these different power structures to see who will get the technocracy in place. They admit that at Davos. So here we are facing the authoritarian technocrats. The general public's in somewhat of a daze, but it's starting to awaken. Historically, what triggers these big turnings? And I'm calling the fourth turning the final turning. Because if we don't make it through this turning, if we don't try to reverse some of this, you can see where the lines converge in really what you call Armageddon, literally. The final turning, the mega turning, the most important turning. What would you call this period, David Knight?
Well, you know, I've talked to Hugo de Garis many times, and he's talked about artificial intelligence and just that one aspect. He talks about the fact that we might have an art-elect war, artificial intelligence, and essentially the technocratic elite going to war with the rest of us. And he says that's going to result in gigadeath. And I think that's just the tip of it, quite frankly, because there's so many other aspects of this. As you're pointing out, Alex, this information coming out of China, the fact that they have broken this prohibition of DNA manipulation of babies, that's very important because when you do it to a baby, when you manipulate the seed DNA, then it has the capability of propagating any of those changes, whether they're good or bad. Any mistakes that you might make are propagated to future generations. It's very different than the kind of medical manipulation that they might do for treatment to an adult, because there they can come in and they can change certain cells, but there's so many billions and billions of cells in a mature adult human or even an animal that any changes you might make, like they've changed the DNA in monkeys, for example, to allow them to be able to see in color. But that is a temporary thing because eventually the body replaces those modified cells. But when you do it to a baby, then it propagates to future generations. At the same time we're seeing that, they're coming out and talking about how they're going to start geoengineering as if they haven't been doing that, saying, hey, look, we can change the climate. We can put stuff up in the stratosphere and so forth. They've been talking about this for a very long time.
And our real crime is that we wanted to have a debate about this before it became standard and ubiquitous. And so our crime is being dead on and trying to warn the public and being not futurist, but being realist, because this stuff's already been around for a long time. The decision has just been made to roll it out. And you look at China, the model of the social credit score now going nationwide, then going worldwide in the next 5 years, and our own government's trying to push this and adopt it. They admit they're going to gene edit by law to have approved embryos that'll be subservient. That's the end of humans. These aren't humans.
Yes.
And that's why they have the trans movement, where you can't say a man's really a man, not a woman, because they're getting you ready for the biological androids, and it'll be a crime to say they're not human.
It's a Brave New World agenda, and China doesn't really care about what anybody thinks. They don't care whether people know what they're doing or not. And so they're coming out with these different things and talking openly about geoengineering, about genetic engineering. They're talking about the control grid that you're talking about. They're creating an underwater AI facility in the South Pacific, as well as projecting their military power. They really don't care. And the European globalists like Macron and others, even though they might try to control this, you got Hillary Clinton and John Kerry saying, hey, you guys in Europe, you need to slow this down. The people are starting to notice. They don't care because they've got an agenda. They understand that with the natural cycle of human generations, that this is all going to be done by 2030. So they've got to pour it on whether or not people realize or not. And of course, the Chinese don't care. So they're out there talking about all this stuff. They're talking about their geoengineering, and that's why they have CNN and CBS start to talk about this. They're openly bragging about their genetic engineering. And so it's a combination of the time frame that they're up against, knowing that they've got to get this in place by 2030, that there's going to be a major societal change one way or the other by 2030. And so they have that kind of pressure put on them. And then you've got the other side of it where China's just openly bragging about what they're going to do and establishing a new world order, a brave new world order, I guess we could say.
And let's be clear, you just said it perfectly. The future of the world is to be decided by 2030, and all the forces of godless globalism who believe humanity's actually obsolete are preparing their so-called transcendence, and the decision has been made to bring in a true dystopian mass culling. And meanwhile, humanity's starting to wake up at a spiritual and cultural level to this threat. And so they're actually accelerating their program now, which means it's going to cause even more unseen crises and problems. That's why all of you speaking out now is so incredibly critical. I mean, how much credibility does InfoWars have now that we've been the cutting edge of exposing this whole exact program of a worldwide dystopic technocracy and human clones and gene editing and world government, because that was the plan. And now here we are, David, and we're the bad guys. We have to be taken off the air.
Well, that's why they had to move now, even as in your face as it was, for all of them to move at once to take InfoWars off of social media. It was imperative for them to do that. They had to do it before the election, and they had to do it because all this stuff is coming out. And we would be telling everybody on social media. It would really ramp up if we had a bigger footprint.
They couldn't have us there to celebrate that we got populists elected, that we overrode their tyranny, that our audience who are activists did this, that, oh, we were right about the clones and world government, and right about it all, and right about the migrant caravans. No, they have to have total media supremacy so they can say there's still no migrant caravan, David.
Well, and you know, as I was talking about in the program earlier today, we have this Nina Burley from Newsweek magazine, and she was coming out saying, you know, all these AR-15 owners, they're mass murderers, and the few that aren't are paranoid freaks. And she got pushback on that, and she said, well, I've just reported you to Secure Democracy and to Robot Labs. These are the people who, like the Southern Poverty Law Center, are serving the Democrats. They give them a list of people that they've identified as being bots with their bots, and then the Democrats
give that to Twitter,
argue with them,
ban people. You're dehumanizing, you're a Russian, and then you get removed. The social score is already here, and they've got their Stasi enforcers. Oh, and Google is moving in former East German Stasi headquarters. David Knight, weekday mornings, 8 a.m. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back live broadcasting worldwide. I am your host, Alex Jones. And Paul Joseph Watson joins us from the United Kingdom to talk Brexit, to talk about the total betrayal that Theresa May is engaged in. Also, the fact that the leader of Ukraine, who came to power after the West overthrew the elected government of Ukraine 5 years ago, is set to be voted out in major polls. So he just declared martial law. Now, we're still going to see if the cabinet and then their Congress or their parliament accepts that. But he has signed the decree of martial law after he sent a bunch of his armed patrol boats into Russian waters, into the Russian port, violating a 2003 treaty and many, many others, where you're supposed to call to the port and tell them you're coming through. So this is a total provocation. The Russians have seized several of the boats and over 20 sailors. and obviously rammed some of the vessels to stop them and board them. So we're going to look at that with Paul Watson. And then you've got the ongoing Islamic invasion of Europe tied in to the migrant invasion here that slammed into the border. Some of them made it across yesterday. Most of them have been stopped, but tens of thousands more are coming. So what we saw in Europe is now happening here. Meanwhile, Theresa May refuses asylum for Pakistani Christian hunted by lynch mobs to appease British Muslims. That's right. Well, it's rude if you don't let them kill the Christians. They don't let Christians live in Pakistan, but that's okay. Come on over here and we'll bow down to you because you're a good voting bloc. That's all coming up with Paul Watson here in just a moment. But first, we've had the biggest sales in our history because it's end of year. We want to get all the stock out so we have to pay inventory on it. George Soros has been trying to shut us down, trying to take our banking away where we can't even process credit cards. You saw PayPal and others go, but we've got others. But I'm not going to sit there with a full warehouse of T-shirts, water filters, air filters, high-quality non-GMO heirloom seeds, really high-quality supplements. We're moving to sell everything by the end of the year and clear out our warehouse. And to do that, we're giving the biggest specials ever on everything. Store-wide free shipping, 50% off on the high-quality supplements. That's X2, X3, Brain Force, Ultimate Bone Broth, Super Male Vitality, Super Female Vitality, Colloidal Silver, Super Blue Fluoride-free iodine and colloidal silver fortified toothpaste and mouthwash, Happy's Mood and Body, Knockout, Ultimate Sleep Formula, Ultimate Turmeric Formula, Bodies with 95% humanoids, DNA Force. What an incredible deal on that flagship product. Pollen Block, BioTrue Selenium, Vitamin Mineral Fusion. It's all there. 50% off bare minimum. Some of it is 75% off. Double Patriot points on top of free shipping. Instead of 5 points towards your next purchase, 10 points. InfoWarsStore.com, InfoWarsLife.com, or 888-253-3139. I want to thank you all for your support. We're going to have to end one of these specials. I may be able to extend this Cyber Monday special till Wednesday or Thursday, but one of the sales that's got to end is the Alexa Pure Pro stainless steel gravity-fed filter for $127. That is because the folks that make it want to get rid of it all before the end of the year, and they only had a couple thousand. It's down to less than 500 right now, so that's going to end in the next few days. Alexa Pure Pro water filtration system. Now, ladies and gentlemen, $127. Leading competitors aren't as good, or $350. It's a great deal at $249 usually. Now it's at $127. And that's a mistake on the shopping cart. I don't know why we did that. If you go back to that, we'll get that fixed ASAP. It says retails $149. No, that was the last super special. No. Retails $247. It always has been. That's what it is. So we're going to get that fixed for you post haste right now. We're going to do that live on air. So for yourself, your family, as a gift, it's a great time to do it. All right, joining us for the balance of this segment, the next, Paul Watson of InfoWars.com and NewsWars.com. So much insanity going on as different power brokers jockey for control. Everything we talked about for decades now out in the open. World government, edited humanoid babies being born in China, humanoids being grown in cows, total open borders, imaginary caravans slamming in, just total censorship, Christians under attack everywhere, Christians refused asylum when they're actually famous and have had death sentences for being Christian, and people are trying to murder them and not allowed into Europe. I mean, what in Hades is going on, Paul?
Well, yeah, Alex, you mentioned a Christian asylum seeker out of Pakistan. This ties into Brexit as well. The immigration problem in the United Kingdom is not European immigrants. There's this big debate over, ending free movement of people between European countries. Polish people aren't the problem coming to the UK. They mainly get jobs, they work hard, they do integrate to a great extent, they're Christians. They're not the problem, okay? You look at the rape gangs in the UK, 84% of the members of those rape gangs are Pakistani or Bangladeshi, okay? You've still got tens of thousands of Pakistani and Bangladeshi immigrants combined. It's probably over 50,000 at least every single year to come into the UK. The Pakistani population of the UK, just over the 10 years between the 2001-2011 census increased by nearly 500,000 people, Alex. This is a country of just over 60 million population. You've got 500,000 Pakistani alone coming in over the course of 10 years. That was 2011. So there's probably another 500,000 now, and those are the ones who actually fill in the census. So these are the people causing the problems. They're overrepresented in crime statistics. They're vastly overrepresented in gang rape statistics. So then you get one Pakistani woman who was the victim of a lynch mob because she tried to drink from the same water supply as men in Pakistan. They're out on the streets basically demanding her death. She's desperately clamoring for asylum. Theresa May says no, because it might upset the precious Muslims already in the United Kingdom. What does that tell you about Theresa May, about the Conservative Party, which promised to reduce immigration to the UK to the tens of thousands? It's currently over 300,000 a year. They've done absolutely nothing. This Brexit deal's a total sellout. They get the opportunity to virtue signal to some extent, let in one Christian Pakistani refugee, and they say no, because the feelings of Muslims in the United Kingdom are more important. Absolutely
Muslims
incredible.
are God to the left and the globalist. Why are they God?
Because they've aligned with the same forces that want to tear down Western civilization. I mean, look at this UN migrant pact, Alex. They say, oh, it's not legally binding, but then they say it's politically binding and lawyers will use it to argue their cases. This basically makes it a human right to illegally emigrate anywhere in the world. Of course, most of these people are coming from the Middle East and North Africa. The UK is going to sign on to it. Again, we're having this whole debate about why people voted for Brexit. Yes, some of it was to do with immigration. I mean, so she's bragging about ending movement of people, which you won't even do for years and years anyway. We can get into that. Meanwhile, she's signing on to the UN Migration Pact, which makes it a human right to illegally emigrate to any country in the world from the Middle East and North Africa. Alex, there was an MEP who came out on Thursday who had the headline on InfoWars. MEP warns new UN pact will make it illegal to criticize mass immigration. So it's not just about Islam anymore. It's about if you post on Facebook that maybe allowing hundreds of thousands of people into the country every single year might not be a great thing. That is now going to be hate speech under this pact. That's how bad it is.
And so the UK votes, never voted to join the EU, votes to get out 18 months ago, or longer than that now, like 2 years ago, plus, and magically it turns into you'll be arrested if you criticize open borders and unlimited Muslims are coming in, but no Christians, because we got to leave them overseas to get killed. We are back live. We are broadcasting worldwide. This is the most demonized, most lied about, most attacked show in the world, because we're pointing out that there is a corporate international race working with authoritarian regimes to bring in a cashless society grid of total control. Now, Paul Watson's done a very powerful video that I'm going to be airing today in the third hour. The truth about China's social score. It's already here. And out of the gates, they're saying if you talk to someone with a low score, your score's dropped. And you won't be able to move 1 inch without it. You will then starve to death. This is their announcement out of the gates, and it's being adopted here. We must say no to this. Remember, just a few years ago, I was a crazy kook talking about this. InfoWars.com broke this in 2014, a Paul Joseph Watson article. And I worked with Paul on that article because I was reading some white papers, and we talked about it. We said, folks, this is the future. Using all the data, face scanning, who do you talk to, what you do, into one platform. And then once you comply to it, then they start adding more and more you've got to do to comply. And now it's like they almost control your soul. You'll think and say whatever they want. And, Paul, that leads me to this. Twitter is now clamping down on anti-trans abuse. And it says that deliberately misgendering someone or saying that a man who's biologically a man is really a man, and if a nurse refuses to do a pap smear on a man because he doesn't have a vagina and because he doesn't have a cervix, you will be fired. Twitter permanently bans feminists for writing that men aren't women. That's like saying, you know, tigers aren't blue whales or Easter bunnies don't exist. But this is, and Laura Loomer got banned over the weekend for exposing genital mutilation and Islam selling women into slavery. That's hurtful. You just heard Paul cover earlier, mainstream news, they won't let a famous Christian woman in who's got fatwas out, who was going to be given the death penalty, who they've sworn to kill in Pakistan. She wants to come to the UK, and they said, no, you would anger Muslims. So here it is. Twitter permanently bans feminists for writing that men aren't women. The new rules of service also acknowledge that marginalized groups, and marginalized, including women, people of color, and LGBT people, tend to face more abuse on the platform. This includes targeting of misgendering or dead naming. This sounds like a crazy language. San Francisco came up with it. So San Francisco is running its eugenics cult to destroy the family, and has tentacles shooting out across the planet. We need a wall around Texas, a digital wall, a wall around America, from the traitors in San Francisco working with the Chi-Coms and others to take down the free society. Paul Watson, your take on this and where this is all going.
Well, they've actually put into a policy now which basically dictates that you can't ever acknowledge that Bruce Jenner ever existed. That's what dead naming is. Dead naming is referring to somebody when they used to be a man or used to be a woman, now that they're transgender. So for you to merely post a video of Bruce Jenner from the Olympics or whatever, or even discuss him, that is now a violation of Twitter's terms of service. Of course, the big fork in the road is going to be Ben Shapiro, because that's his whole shtick, is talking about the transgender issue. That's how he came to prominence a few years ago. He's obviously more aligned with the establishment neocon wing of the Republicans. He was a never Trumper. So if they go after Ben Shapiro, that's going to be a fork in the road. But as we posted today on InfoWars, they just banned an Iraq war vet, Jesse Kelly. He literally fought. His friends died in Iraq. He came back injured, only to be silenced by Silicon Valley, by San Francisco. He was on Tucker Carlson a couple of months ago when you got banned on Twitter, saying, listen, Alex Jones is the first of many, and now he's gone. They didn't even give him a reason. He's banned from Twitter. As he said, Laura Loomer basically criticized female genital mutilation. She's banned from Twitter. Somebody did a list of the most prominent conservatives on Twitter. There's like 5 left now, Alex. It's like Ben Shapiro and a few others, depending on who you categorize as conservative, but with people with over like 200,000, 300,000, 400,000 followers. There's literally about 5 people left now. So, you know, I joked that someone like Lindsey Graham will be the last person on Twitter in 2038, and he's on a final warning for forgetting to include one of the letters in LGBTQI, blah, 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 whatever. That was wrong. That's going to happen even sooner than that. That will be the next thing. If you forget to include one letter in LGBTQ, you know, ad infinitum, then you'll be gone from Twitter. So, yeah, where's the executive order, Alex? I mean, it was supposedly in the pipeline for the past 2 months, and then it just disappeared, didn't it? If Trump doesn't address this, he's going to upset a lot of people within his base. But the other thing that's happening with Twitter, Alex, is that Instapundit, which was a pretty big account on Twitter, literally just retired. He said, that's it. My ideas aren't welcome here. What is the point in putting any time and effort into a platform which hates me and makes me feel unwelcome and is about to ban me anyway? So people are now literally retiring. Fox News hasn't tweeted for 3 weeks since Twitter refused to pull down tweets threatening Tucker Carlson's family after that Antifa raid on his house. So Fox News has basically retired from Twitter. Who will be the next prominent name to retire from Twitter? And will that send it down, Alex? They're already hemorrhaging users. They call it killing bots. I haven't grown. I was getting, 500 new followers a day. Now it's nothing, or it declines every day. So they're losing thousands and thousands of followers a day. Is it going to go the same way as Facebook? Or is it just going to become an even bigger echo chamber for the left? But that's exactly what they want, because they're not real liberals. They're authoritarians.
Paul, look, we already have a social score here, and it's not a social credit score. It's a behavioral template to quote, surveil everything you do, and then penalize you and others until you are basically conditioned to follow whatever orders they give you. And then they can always change those orders and expand them. So it's not coming, it's here. This is clear and present authoritarianism, and it's a cult where they want to bring out the cloned human babies. They want to have the gene-edited humans that really won't even be humans. And then they want to make it illegal if you criticize any of that. So they're starting with men turning into women and women turning into men. And they make it first, oh, don't be hateful. I don't hate any of these people. Most of them are mentally ill. But now they want to target your kids and tell them they need to have this done to them and brainwash them and psychologically abuse them, which it clearly is. And then if you try to dead name and say, here is Caitlyn Jenner when he was a man, and he's always been a man, he didn't even have the surgery to remove his male genitals. So this is a cult where they sit there and they tell you, you will say what we want. You will believe what we want. And if you disagree with what we're doing or us sexualizing your children, please get that thing off the screen. If you're doing this, it's these men dressed up in clown outfits. If you don't let men in clown outfits come talk to your children about their genitals, then you're a bad person. So you always wondered how the pedophiles and how the control freaks that have taken over the Vatican and everything else would do this. They're doing it. It's here. They're ending humanity as we know it. It's a full assault on the species. Paul Watson.
Yeah, now they're actually incorporating it into the curriculum in schools in Sweden, Alex. Meanwhile, sterilizations of men have doubled, I think in Stockholm, tripled over the past 5 years. So that's a coordinated move. In the UK, there was a big scandal recently in schools. Children as young as 5 and 6 turned out they were autistic children, and the teachers were abusing that and calling them confused so as then to press onto them this idea that they were maybe transgender, maybe they needed the hormone blockers and the sex change, literally sending them to doctors and hospitals, kids as young as 6, when they were just autistic kids with learning difficulties. So it is a child abuse issue right now. But again, you can't talk about that on Twitter, otherwise you get banned. And again, it does go back to this social credit score thing, Alex, because they take off-platform behavior into account. So now if you say something bad on Facebook, Twitter recognizes that. You get banned on Twitter as well. Same thing in China with the social credit score. Hey, at least China's being honest about what they're doing. At least they're being upfront about it. The irony is the sheer hypocrisy of the media in the West, decrying China for what they're doing while cheerleading for and lobbying for the exact same thing with media, with social media in the West. That's the hypocrisy.
And they literally have public events where small children stick money in the G-string of fat men shaking their asses. And Twitter and Facebook say, along with Google, we were taken down for daring to say it's wrong. It's the total assault on reality. In the fictional nightmare police state world of 1984, Winston Smith said freedom is the ability to say 2 + 2 = 4. But in the real dystopic world that we now live in 2018, that's more like Brave New World, where they're building the genderless, classless slave society, the ability to say men are men and women are women, and there are only 2 genders, that is freedom. And we were just breaking down the true abuse of children in the U.S. and UK, where they go into mentally disabled children and confuse them and then say, would you like to get on hormones? You could really be a boy. You could really be a girl. That's what bullies and monsters do. They pick on children. That's why all of these drag-tot events, many cases they don't even tell the parents they're coming, target first graders and kindergartners, and they dress up in macabre demon outfits and clown outfits as to traumatize. Paul Watson, shifting gears the time we have with you. The situation with Brexit, boiling it down, gut level. I talked to a lot of people in the UK. You live there. We had some folks over from the UK for Thanksgiving, and they said the people are on the edge of civil war. No, people have never been more awake. The fact that they can't get out of the EU, they never voted to be in it. The fact they're being flooded with radical Muslims everywhere and giant sex kidnapping rings and acid attacks, and just London just is a hellhole now, just like Paris, that they've really jumped the shark. So may be able to engage in treason and turn Brexit into this total capitulation, even worse than what the UK was under before. But isn't this the beginning of the end for the globalists, because now they fully have awoken the nationalist parties? Like Hillary said earlier this week, she said, oh, I want open borders and world government, but you need to back off for a while. That's why nationalists are winning every election. What's your gut level assumption?
Well, what's happening with Brexit, Alex, is that I don't even know why they call this a deal. It's not a deal. It's an extension of the UK remaining in the EU. They had this transition period. First it was 1 year, then it was 18 months, now it's 2 years. Now it's forever, Alex. In Article 132 of this Brexit deal, it literally says that the UK, if the government requests it, the transition period can be extended to 31st of December 20XX. Okay, that could be anything. That could be 2099. So within this deal is the option to extend it forever, with Britain remaining in the EU subject to all their rules and regulations, but with no say whatsoever on what those rules and regulations are, no seat at the table. And even after this transition period, if we do leave the EU, which is in name only, we're in this backstop agreement, which means we're in the customs union until we can sign a trade deal with the EU. So it's not, they haven't even agreed a trade deal. They've just extended us being in the EU until 20XX. So it wasn't an agreement. It was a complete capitulation. It was surrender. It's the worst deal in history. Theresa May somehow managed to pull off negotiating a deal so bad that it would be better staying in the EU for the UK. And that's exactly the point, Alex. They want it to be terrible. They want it to be bedlam. So then we re-enter the EU officially within the next 5 years. There was an article in the Sunday Times last week. British government considering encouraging financial market crash to intimidate MPs into voting for Theresa May's Brexit deal. So she's probably going to lose the vote on this crappy deal, which isn't a deal. And we're going to go into no deal, which is the best scenario for sovereignty at this point. Then they're going to have this financial crash, they've talked about triggering it, then have another vote where the MPs are intimidated into accepting her.
Do 5 more minutes, because this is too important. And I forgot to make this point. It's like the Democrats trying to plunge our economy, and Bill Maher saying plunge the economy to stop Trump. And now the Federal Reserve is raising interest rates to do it. And they do it publicly. I mean, what a scandal that they're threatening financial Armageddon to keep you in the unelected EU. We'll be right back with PJW. Paul Joseph Watson is in the UK, and he just began to lay out, if you just joined us, how insane the new so-called Brexit deal is. So they take the UK, voting 2 years ago plus to pull out of the EU they never voted to enter. And years later, Theresa May then has a Brexit deal, which opens the borders, puts the UK totally under the unelected EU's total control. And then members of the government begin to threaten financial collapse to make the public and other members of parliament get behind staying in the EU. That's why people warned to never go into the EU, because and now they're creating an EU army to dominate and control people. Paul, spend a few minutes, lay out the compendium, because you've been going to parliament, you're involved with UKIP, the UK Independence Party, you're an advisor. You've been in these meetings, you've been at parliament in the last week. Describe what you've witnessed and break down what's happening.
What's happening, Alex, is that we've been sold a bill of goods. This isn't even a Brexit deal. It's an extension of the UK remaining in the EU. And that's in Article 132 of the agreement, which literally states the government, if it so chooses, can trigger an extension to the transition phase, which is already the end of 2020 initially, could be the end of 2022 eventually. An extension of that until 31st of December 20XX. That could literally be in 80 years' time. We could still be in the EU under this agreement, which is the worst agreement ever. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a capitulation. It was a complete surrender, overseen by Theresa May, who voted to remain, who is a globalist, overseen by almost her entire cabinet, who are all Remainers and globalists, overseen by the top civil servant in Britain negotiating Brexit, a guy called Ollie Robbins, who was literally a Soviet Union sympathizer, who hated capitalism, praised Stalin. This is in his own article from his college days, which weren't that long ago. He said, quote, "The demise of the Soviet experiment means that for those growing up in the world today, especially Western Europe, there appears to be no alternative to the mad excesses of modern capitalism." So he's in this article praising communism, praising Soviet leaders. He's the guy overseeing the agreement to extricate the UK from the EU. A Remainer, a Soviet sympathizer, Theresa May, a globalist, a Remainer. Okay, we're paying them £39 billion for this separation, which isn't even a separation. We're going to remain in the EU customs union for a period that we don't even know how long it's going to last. We haven't even negotiated a trade deal with the EU. If the EU chooses not to negotiate with us, then we stay in the EU because they have control over that negotiation, and they're negotiating with people who have already betrayed the UK and whose loyalties lie with globalists, not with their own country. So this is not us leaving the EU. It's an extension of us remaining in the EU. We're going to copy the common rule book, which is all the EU rules and regulations. We're going to be unable to make new trade deals with other countries around the world, including America. It prevents us from doing that. This deal, Alex, is worse than actually remaining in the EU. We'd be better off remaining in the EU because we'd actually have a say, we'd have a seat at the table. And that's exactly what it was intended to do from the very start. Sunday Times reported last weekend, MPs, the government, talking about encouraging a financial market crash to intimidate members of parliament into voting for Theresa May's crappy deal, which isn't even a deal, which isn't even as leaving the EU. So they're literally talking about kamikaze-style financial terrorism. They're fear-mongering with troops on the streets. They're saying, we won't be able to put the chemicals in our water because all the chemicals that purify the water come from European countries. They could easily source it from a different source. But again, they're not going to do that because they're intentionally trying to trigger bedlam so we essentially remain in the EU. This has been the plan from the very beginning. This is what I warned about. We've had Denmark, Ireland, France, all these other countries vote against EU treaties, and the vote is completely ignored. Every single time they're doing the same thing with the UK. It's a complete betrayal, and it's unconscionable. I mean, they had riots in Denmark after they voted against the EU, yet they rammed it through anyway. Whether that happens in the UK remains to be seen. But they're willing to risk financial collapse and bedlam to get their way, to try and override this natural populist revolution that's sweeping Europe.
Paul, I'm going to take this piece with you live in this segment, the last segment. It's very powerful. I'm going to put it out to warn the world, not just the truth about Brexit, but, I mean, how do you put this? It's so epic. Traitors inside the UK threaten financial collapse, or UK held hostage with threats of financial collapse by globalist EU supporters? Because we're going to put this video out. It's very important. It's on record they're threatening the collapse. That right there shows how villainous these people are.
Yeah, I'll read it straight from the Sunday Times. This isn't InfoWars saying this. Is from the Sunday Times. Number 10's plan is to encourage a crash in financial markets after losing a first vote. Okay, the first vote on her Brexit deal is December 13th, and she's going to lose it by all accounts. She hasn't got enough votes, so she will lose it. So that after losing the first vote, in the hope this stampedes MPs into voting for it a second time. Remember, they did the same thing with the bailouts in America, Alex. They threatened martial law, financial collapse, basically a new depression unless they voted for the bailouts. This is economic terrorism, and it's in the pages of the Sunday Times, the preeminent newspaper in Britain, talking about the same thing because they're that desperate to ignore the results of a democratic vote. That's how evil, authoritarian, and Machiavellian they truly are.
And that clip was on C-SPAN. There was Secretary of the Treasury, Henry Paulson, being questioned, and they threatened martial law, tanks in the streets, if they hadn't done the bailout mainly to EU banks. That was absolutely insane. That's how crazy all this is. And now they're threatening an EU army to physically invade places like Italy if they don't let more of the Islamists in. Great job, Paul Joseph Watson, over at newswars.com and prisonplanet.com, and the articles you write, obviously, for InfoWars.com. You've got a lot of important news and information coming up. Your latest video dealing with the Chinese social score is chilling. We're going to be airing that in the third hour today. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Alex.
And we've got Brandon Darby, the head of Breitbart Texas, who is an intrepid reporter, goes over into very dangerous no-go zones in Arizona, Texas, and California, into Mexico. He's an expert on what's happening with these caravans and these invasions. He'll be joining us at the bottom of the hour. Roger Stone's going to pop in for one segment because, wow, I'm really proud of Dr. Jerome Corsi. I know he's had some financial, not financial, some physical issues that I've noticed personally and things, but under a lot of pressure. But Roger Stone Associates says he won't agree to plea deal. He refuses to lie to, I guess, indict Roger Stone. So this is just heart-wrenching to see Corsi, a super patriot. I talked to a national host, one of the biggest TV hosts in the country. Well, he's the second largest television host in the country. And he was just pointing out that this is so nightmarish. I mean, Corsi's a super patriot. Absolutely helped bring down the Soviet Union, best-selling author, researcher, worked for the State Department many years. Absolutely a true blue American. Helped expose NAFTA and GATT, TPP, helped get us out of the North American Union deal. And he deserves a medal, not Mueller, this globalist, trying to put him in prison. So Roger is coming up to pop in on that. And then Brandon Darby of Breitbart, Texas, editor of Breitbart, Texas, and so much more. We'll be back on the side. I haven't really properly gotten into Russia and the Ukraine situation. I will do that at the start of the next hour for 2 segments. Then I will play Paul's report because it's important. And I'm going to put some bookends on it, though, because it's even worse than he says on the Chinese social score that is the global program. It's all coming up. Next year's news today, the most censored, the most blocked, the most hated transmission. Without you spreading the links, without you sharing them on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, without you texting them to friends and family, they'll win. And this emergency beacon exposing the globalists will fail. Don't forget, we have the biggest specials ever at InfoWarsStore.com for Cyber Monday. Please take advantage of those. Well, it's been quite a 2-year roller coaster with Robert Mueller III, who helped deliver the uranium to the Russians illegally, who helped cover up all the different Clinton crimes, to have Hillary with uranium-1 and Hillary with the Chi-Coms and Hillary with the child smuggling out of Haiti and Hillary with hundreds of countries putting billions into her foundation. And then the very foxes that have been slaughtering the hens in the chicken coop have an endless witch hunt against Roger Stone and Trump and myself. And I mean, believe me, I know that the thing's 100% fake because I have zero connections to the Kremlin and all this crap. And then we hear that they're telling Corsi to lie. He says they're telling me to lie and make up stuff and say that Roger Stone perjured himself when he didn't. And they're asking me questions about Alex Jones. And they're asking me questions about all this, and I won't lie. And then we hear, oh, he's going to turn. He never said that, to try to get us to turn against him. And then he goes, well, I might do a plea bargain. But now he's come out and said, well, I'm not because they want me to lie again. Well, here's Alan Dershowitz yesterday saying that, oh, it's going to be devastating. It won't be criminal, but politically it'll be damning. Why doesn't the president have fireside chats and address the nation once a week? And look at the cameras and say, Hillary's the Russian agent. Hillary's the globalist. I'm the pro-American guy. I'm the guy trying to stop the border being rammed down and trying to bring our jobs back. And the Federal Reserve just raised interest rates 7 times to kill our economy. Tweeting isn't enough, Mr. President. And I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not saying you're not doing a great job. I'm saying I was talking to the military on and off air yesterday, and they said they want fireside chats. They want you looking in the camera from the Oval Office, from that famous desk, and laying out this garbage. So with this latest twist, we're going to Roger Stone, but here is Alan Dershowitz, who's been acting like he's pro-Trump lately, but now he's pulling the knife out. Here it is.
Let's just talk about the information. So we're getting information from Paul Manafort. We're getting information perhaps from Corsi. We're already getting information from Gates, from Cohen, from Phil. That's an awful lot of people tied to the president providing evidence.
It is, and I think the report is going to be devastating to the president. And I know that the president's team is already working on a response to the report. And so at some point, when the report's made public, and that's a very hard question considering the new attorney general who has the authority to decide when and under what circumstance to make it public. It will be made public probably with a response alongside. The president will say, look, it's political. There's their account and there's our account, and then the American public will have to judge the credibility.
For you to say it's devastating is really something,
Well,
Dan.
but
Let's just talk about the information. So we're getting...
Wow, so think about that. They can't indict anybody for any connection to Russians. It's all, you didn't pay taxes 15 years ago on taxi cabs or whatever. Nothing to do with Trump. So it'll be this political garbage from someone in bed with the Russians who launched all this to cover up his involvement. Roger's popping in for the next 5 minutes. Roger, I got to tell you, I always liked Corsi, always admired him. That's why he worked for InfoWars for about 2 years. Now to see that he openly says they're telling him to lie and that he won't do it, and then, okay, well, there's a plea deal, but obviously the plea deal was more lies, and he says he will not do it. Hey, what do you expect to come next? And what can we do for this poor guy, Corsi? Pray for him?
Well, first of all, it's very clear that he's being persecuted and prosecuted not for his, not for lying, but for his refusal to lie. As he told One American News, they want him to say that he was the conduit between Julian Assange and WikiLeaks and Roger Stone, and Roger Stone was the conduit to Donald Trump and the Trump campaign. That's a falsehood. That is not true. He knows it's not true. Any information he gave to me about the Podestas was available in the public domain if you were a brilliant researcher like Corsi and knew where to look for it. And if he deduced that John Podesta's emails were being stolen and would be published, he never told me about it. That said, all of the research he did give me on the Podestas about their involvement with the oligarchs around Putin and the lucrative gas deal and the lucrative aluminum deal and the lucrative banking deal, everything he told me turned out to be entirely accurate. That's the amazing thing, Alex. There was Russian collusion, but it was in Hillary's campaign.
Well, and then she later admitted that she didn't meet once, she didn't meet twice. She met 3 times with Vladimir Putin when she was Secretary of State. Once in his private home, she spent more than 2 hours, and she, where'd we find out about it? In her own book. Previous to that, she'd said she'd never met with Putin. Then she publishes a book after she criticizes Trump, admitting she met with Putin. I mean, what do you make of this?
And as we know, Barack Obama is caught on a hot mic saying, once I'm reelected, I'll have much greater flexibility. So who was it who was selling out to the Russians? Who was it who was trying to get cozy with Vladimir Putin? Not Donald Trump, that's for sure. Look, I think that I feel very badly about Jerry Corsi. He described their interrogation of him, 40 hours of interrogation, as something worthy of the KGB or the North Koreans. And he refuses simply to lie.
Well, his quote was to NBC, they kept saying things that weren't true over and over again and telling me to say they were. That's illegal. To have, it's not even the FBI, it's Hillary's former top lawyer involved in Uranium One, of course, and other things, other cover-ups of the foundation. She's in there literally, under the hot lights for 4 different visits, 10 hours each time, literally trying to get him to lie or she'll throw his ass in prison when she should be the one getting indicted, in my view.
Well, there's the real irony. You have all these Democrats demanding that Whitaker recuse himself, demanding that Acting Attorney General Whitaker come before Congress, arguing that he has no authority based on his previous political position. But the woman who mocked and ridiculed Corsi on the witness stand was Jeannie Reid, who was the personal attorney for the Clinton Foundation and for Hillary Clinton, and gave $5,400 to the Clinton campaign. That's Mr. Mueller's prosecutor for Jerry Corsi. I think this tells us much.
It tells us that these people are crazy arrogant, that they could find some other political prosecutor, but to then sit in Hillary's personal attack dog, who's up to her eyeballs at the foundation with all of this criminal activity. It's just too rich. It's too much, Roger.
Well, I think the American people will see through it. But as you know, Alex, they have an unlimited budget with which to destroy Jerry Corsi, Roger Stone, Alex Jones, and anybody who supports this president. That's why I urge people to go to stonedefensefund.com. I urge people to go to InfoWars.com and make a donation if you're not looking for one of our great programs, because they want to shut us down. Taking away my voice at InfoWars is an important part of Mueller's strategy. That's why we need your support.
Folks, this is for all the marbles. You don't think we're just going to take the country back and it's going to be easy. And those of us that are willing to fight on the front lines have been targeted. You've been standing with us. But more than ever, we have the Black Friday specials that are the biggest sales ever, extending the specials that we had last week, Black Friday into Cyber Monday. But it's going to end by Wednesday. Free shipping store-wide, 50% off the supplements. Water filtration, 49% off. It's all got to end. These are the best deals ever. Take advantage of them. Thank you, Roger Stone, and God bless Dr. Corsi. Now, when we kick off the next hour, I'm going to get into the declaration of martial law in Ukraine and the provocation where they sent the ships into the Russian harbor, violating the treaty and harbor rules, so the Russians would then board them with their Coast Guard so that they could then declare martial law because the leader in the Ukraine is very unpopular and was set to lose the election. He's talking about canceling the election now because he did the provocation with the Russians. We're going to play all the video, show you the maps, go over the latest the next hour. Then Paul Watson's very powerful report on the Chinese Communist social score that's going nationwide next year and going worldwide the year after that. And Facebook and others are involved in it here. We told you about it 5 years ago, but now it's mainstream news. That is all coming up. But if you look at all this, it's interconnected. And you've got George Soros and the UN getting U.S. taxpayer money, funding the caravans out of North Africa on the Zodiac boats and funding the groups out of the Middle East and Europe. And now you've got the big aid organizations building these refugee centers in Latin America and moving them towards the border. Brandon Darby is the editor of Breitbart Texas, at Brandon Darby on Twitter, Breitbart.com. /author/Brandon Darby. Of course, you can find his work. It's usually on the front page of Breitbart. And he goes into Mexico and some of the most dangerous no-go zones because we've sent some of our reporters in there and the FBI meets them at the airport because they don't even go in there. They always ask for our footage and stuff. So, I mean, Brandon goes in there hundreds of times. Perfect time to get him on to talk about the 5,000 they report in Tijuana trying to get into the U.S., the 35 million in the last 20 years that have already gotten in. But these are different. They're totally more and more being politically motivated. Before was a lot of folks actually fleeing carnage. And some of these people are doing that as well. But the media keeps showing images of a woman and 2 children instead of the fact that they're almost all military-age men. So Brandon Darby is joining us in this segment and the next to give us his expert take on this and what his ICE and Border Patrol sources in California, Texas, and other areas are telling him. The president tweeted today that Mexico should move the flag-waving migrants, many of whom are stone-cold criminals, back to their own countries. Do it by plane, do it by bus, do it any way you want. Sounds like Dr. Seuss. But they are not coming to the U.S. We will close the border permanently if need be. Congress build that wall. And then Trump goes on from there. Brandon, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you for having me on, Alex.
Where to start here? Because you are one of the leading experts on this. The caravan, the latest you're seeing, Trump's response. What's front and center for you?
Well, front and center is this. We have to remember that over the last year, we've had an estimated 1,200 people, either illegally or irregularly, and that is up for debate because some of them cross and turn themselves in. But we've had an average of 1,200 people per day. That means every 4 days, there is a caravan's worth of these people coming across our border in between ports of entry. We've had this happening for over a year, and I think that people need to understand that, yes, it's important to focus on the caravan. Yes, it's newsworthy. What happened yesterday is definitely newsworthy, but people have to understand that most of the people, roughly 1,000 of those 1,200 per day, are coming into Texas. And so that is happening every day. Every 4 days there's a caravan's worth coming into Texas. It gets very little coverage outside of Breitbart and a few others. Mainstream media doesn't focus on it, and also the government officials don't focus on it, and they have us focused over there, and that's fine for now. Yesterday, there's an estimated 5,000 people from this caravan in Tijuana. Yesterday, 10% of them, which is 500, mostly military-aged men, decided to seize our border. They ripped open border panels, came through. They threw softball-sized rocks at our Border Patrol agents, which is life-threatening. Border Patrol agents responded with chemicals. There's debate about whether it was pepper balls or tear gas. I think it was pepper balls and pepper gas. But which could be argued that is tear gas. It is a form of it.
But when you got thousands of people storming and throwing rocks at you, they're lucky they didn't get shot with rubber bullets.
Right. And so what happened is a couple of very irresponsible parents had their kids in the mix of that. Mainstream media has decided to focus on the kids and the women holding two kids fleeing in that image, and not the photos of life-threatening softball-sized rocks being thrown at our agents as military-aged men rip our border barrier apart and run through. And that's where we're at. Media is focusing on it. They're making some very outrageous claims, claiming that the government or that Trump is using chemical warfare on migrants. But then we remembered that in 2013, the exact same thing happened around the exact same time on November 24th or 25th of 2013, and the Obama administration responded with the same response. They used the same response, fired the same pepper bullets, fired and repelled a caravan from forcibly entering, just like Trump has done, the Trump administration has done. But when we're doing a side-by-side comparison of media coverage, the media didn't blame Obama for it at that time. They blamed the unruly people coming in. Very interesting.
Well, I've seen the headlines, as have you and everybody else. When the mainstream media does cover this, there wasn't a lot of coverage of it last night that I saw. It was crop photos of a few women and children, as you mentioned. We just showed it to TV viewers. Or headlines like, Border Patrol attacks migrants approaching U.S. No, they weren't approaching. They were overrunning it. And then if those images are seen worldwide, just like what happened to Europe starting 6 years ago, we'll have 15 million people. And I've talked to military folks on air. I've also talked to some off air. I know you talked to a lot of people involved. They're being told by the Pentagon briefers that if these tens of thousands get in, because obviously more are coming, there are a whole bunch of caravans, as you said, many arriving every day in places like Texas. But if these really aggressive big caravans break through, that's going to then be the signal for even larger groups to start the, quote, migration.
Well, and that's kind of what we're seeing. As policies changed during the Obama administration, the numbers increased and increased and increased. When Trump first took office, the numbers decreased because of the rhetoric. People thought, hey, I'm not going to be allowed to come. I'm not going to be allowed to stay. So they didn't come. And then they started to realize, wait, we are allowed to stay. So they started to come in the same numbers again. And now we're back up to Obama-era numbers, if not surpassing them. I think, the average is 1,200 per day over the last year. But in October, we had over 50,000 people cross our border in between ports of entry. That's just the ones we apprehended, and they say that we probably apprehend 55% of the people who cross. So that's very significant in number. I think a lot of people need to keep in mind when we're talking about this, and especially if someone out there is a liberal and they're listening, whether because they're just interested or whether because they're trying to wait for one of us to say something and use it against us or whatever they do, they need to understand that this was 10% of the caravan who did this and engaged in this behavior. There's another 90% who decided not to engage in this behavior. And rather than defending that 90%, which are telling their stories, which I could understand, there's some that's understandable. Media is choosing to focus and defend these rock-throwing, military-aged men who used a couple of women and children as human shields or as media ploys. And I think that's just the most bizarre thing I've ever heard of.
Brandon, when we come back from break, I know you just stick as a journalist to the facts of what's happening, but the end game, the aid group, Soros is involved. They admit they want to break our borders and then use the groups they bring in, who they politically control, as an internal group for milking their welfare payments that the Democrat groups skim off of, using them as a voting bloc. I mean, this is really a clear and present danger to the sovereignty of the nation. And when Trump says it's the #1 issue, I mean, it really is. It's the basic integrity of having a country. And now when the president says we're a nation, they say the word nation or nationalist is bad. Well, then what are we if we're not a nation? We have the editor of Breitbart, Texas, a guy with a lot of courage, Brandon Darby, big target of the left, big target of their lies, because he's a hero, with us. We'll be right back. All right. Brandon Darby gave me some really powerful intel off record, but we're not able to get to it at this point. But let's just say this. Everybody should be watching the next few days because things are obviously already crazy. They're about to get a lot more crazy. Up to 5,000 people from the different UN-funded caravans have already showed up in Tijuana on the U.S. border with the United States there in San Diego. Compelling video, compelling audio. And Brandon, when we went to break, we were getting into what's the end game here. I mean, we know that a lot of these are normal people. They're leaving economic collapse, but a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are socialists. A lot of them are criminals. A lot of them have been caught smuggling drugs, people. What is the big end game here, though, from your research with the Democrats and others? And what are they planning to do to President Trump? Because I see them hoping that there's some type of violence, hoping some kids get hurt. And instead of the people that put their kids in harm's way, instead of them getting in trouble, it's going to be the American people and the fact that our nation even exists.
Yeah, you know, it's a kind of a complicated deal. Like I look at these groups and I think that historically what I see is that the vast majority of them are really people who are living in a really bad situation, and they're probably not bad people. But that doesn't take away from the fact if you have 10 or 20% who are bad people, you still can't allow that many people who are the type of people who would throw rocks at our Border Patrol agents that would possibly maim or kill them. You can't allow them in the country, right? And then you get into economic issues, sovereignty issues. I mean, we have a plethora of issues. But when we look at just out of that 5,000, like I said, 10% of them tried to do something violent and aggressive. The other 90% didn't. So there's a mix of people, and it's, you know, you can acknowledge the humanity of these people and the plight that they're going through, but at the same time think, hey, as a nation, we can't allow this to occur. We can't allow you in. You know, because you imagine if those men who were attacking our agents yesterday with those rocks and had such aggression, if they would stay home and turn that aggression towards the criminal groups that are destroying their country, making it uninhabitable in the first place, they would take their country back. But instead, it's easier. See, we give a relief valve for these countries. And so all of the people who strive for something better, who are willing to fight for liberty or fight for something better and take chances for something better, we make it easier for them to come here than it is for them just to better their own country. And that's actually a disservice to El Salvador. It's a disservice to Honduras. It's a disservice to Mexico and all of the rest of the nations that we allow to do this. We need to do something that makes those people stay home, and those people who strive for better need to strive for better and fight for better in their own country so their countries will be better, so they can have jobs, they can overthrow the criminal organizations that are running their countries, and they can ultimately better the entire world that way. What we're doing, providing that pressure valve, it's not helping. It doesn't help us, but it dang sure doesn't help their countries where they come from.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, you know, you've been demonized and lied about because you've been very truthful, you've been very effective, and you really scare the left because you used to be what you'd call a liberal, and I'm speaking for you. And I think you still are a classical liberal, just not a modern leftist. But when you look at the average leftist, they will lie, they will cheat, they will steal. They want to bring these people in to have a permanent underclass that they control. Just like in all the blue cities, set up the very same system. And just experiencing the left, I didn't realize how bad the average leftist was even 15 years ago, when now I know in hindsight they were making up now totally proven, unbelievable lies about you. Then I've had it happen to me where they just, and it's gone from high-level leftist being liars and being corrupt and hating America, and Cuomo saying America was never great, it'll never be great or whatever, to now even low-level liberals. I mean, a lot of them are still nice. But if they're a leftist, they have just gotten radicalized, and they are anti-free speech, and they're anti-family, and they're anti-America, and they just say no borders, no walls, no USA at all. And so I used to think of Antifa as a little small group of idiots, but now I think Antifa, that mindset is becoming the operating system of the Democrats. What's your view? Because you're embedded in the middle of this. You go into the most dangerous areas, see your reports of anybody, and so you're seeing all sides. And I agree with you. I don't think the poor people trying to have a better life on average are bad, but they're being used by very, very bad people.
Oh, very much so. I mean, you know, this is where it's just, we all just have a big difference of how we look at the world and what we want for the world, you know? Some things we have in common, like I don't want to see people hungry. They don't want to see people hungry. I want everyone to get health care. They want everyone to get health care. But they believe in going about it a very different way. But then other things we just don't agree on. You know, they believe in a European model of our personal responsibilities. I don't. That really matters. Like, they want to take guns. I want to keep my guns. But what's behind that is really the issue. What's behind that is that they have adopted a mindset and a mentality that exists, or that was created in an area where there's a lot of population density, where the police are nearby. We live in areas where we have a country that's very vast, open, wide expanses, where law enforcement sometimes can't get there for 25 minutes or more. And with a lot of our communities in Texas, say, for instance, and in the United States even. And so taking away guns, like for me, for instance, I challenge cartels. Like, I directly expose members of Mexican drug cartels, international criminal syndicates, and I get them busted. That's what I do. That's what my writing does. I tell stories. I tell the people stories who are affected by them. I let them write it under a pseudonym. We bring enough media attention to one of these guys that the Mexican government gets embarrassed, the U.S. government gets embarrassed, they go after him, and then you have these criminal networks who strongly resent me and my team. And so for me, when you say you're going to take my firearms, or I shouldn't have a high-capacity magazine, I take that as a very direct threat to my way of life and to my existence. Because I exercise my freedom of expression, these people want to kill me, and now I have liberals who want to take my firearms from me. I don't accept that. But see, they look at the world and they don't think that we should protect ourselves or our property. They don't even value the property. I look at my property and I say, hey, that's part of my life. I worked really hard to pay for my Jeep. I worked my butt off. That's a lot of time I took away from my child to work to pay for that Jeep. If you take my Jeep, you're taking part of my life. I have to defend what's mine. They don't look at things that way because they don't value private property the same way we do. They don't value the same thing. So the left is a lot like the right. There are all these different factions on the right and different mindsets, and there's all these different factions and mindsets on the left. But right now on the left, the Democratic Party, like in Texas, it's controlled by a lot of very moderate Democrats. On a national level, it's very much controlled by the far left, who I think do sympathize with Antifa, do sympathize with the more radical elements on the far left. You know, Andrew Breitbart used to call them Chardonnay-sipping revolutionaries, because they have their nice homes, they have their money, they drink their wine at night, their Chardonnay, yet they glorify, deify, romanticize their more radical counterparts on the left, and they offer cover for them. Whenever I had an issue, when I worked undercover, I busted a bunch of far leftist Antifa guys who were trying to bomb Republicans and bomb law enforcement officers simply for meeting and for expressing their constitutional, engaging in their constitutional rights to meet and assemble and express their views. They tried to shut the RNC down in 2008. And did the New York Times editorial board go out there and throw Molotovs? No, they didn't. But what did they do is, instead of framing it as far left spawns bomb plot, they framed it as far left feels betrayed by their government. And they began to frame and offer political air cover for these far left radicals. I was the bad guy. The FBI was the bad guy, not the people who tried to burn and maim people with homemade napalm.
Oh, listen, when I tried to get into Trump's inauguration, they had all these entrances blocked. They beat up women and children in front of me. The police were protecting them because they were, still under Obama's control until Trump got inaugurated. And then the media, the New York Times called me and said I made that up. And when I sent them like 10 articles showing it, even from NBC News, they said I made it up. So it's this upside down world where Jim Acosta grabs the mic, pushes the woman's arm down, and then they say, we doctored the video. I know you're about to be on the road. You got to go. Very exciting stuff coming up from Breitbart, Texas, with Brandon Darby, but we got to go to break. Do 5 more minutes, because I want to ask you when we come back in 5 more minutes where you think all this ends, and how can we reach out to the average leftist and get them to think for themselves, because there's 7.5 billion people in the world. There's about to be 10 billion by 2030, they estimate. Less than 1 billion are in the first world. We can't have billions of people coming here. I mean, and not with a welfare state, it'll collapse. In the days of Ellis Island, you didn't get any welfare, and you got quarantined for 3 months. They just act like, no, Statue of Liberty, everybody come in, and everything's free. We'll go bankrupt. Brandon Darby's our guest. I'm Alex Jones with NewsWars.com. Tomorrow's news today. Whatever you do, share the live links to get around the censors. I'm Alex Jones, your host. Brandon Darby is right up there with the folks at Project Veritas. I mean, there's no more hardcore journalist out there than people, obviously, like the folks at Breitbart, Texas, headed up by Brandon Darby, and then, of course, the folks over at Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, and you see how they get persecuted, how they get lied about, how people go after you. And I was always a libertarian, but not so much a conservative. So the left would lie about me some, but not as much. When I started backing Trump, I really got the full treatment. And I learned you cannot believe a word they say. In fact, whatever they say, it's the opposite. And it's incredible how they all gang up, but that's a separate issue. Brandon, where do you see all this going with the third world population exploding, socialist governments looting the people like Venezuela, borders collapsing everywhere? There's no way we can take care of all these people like you were saying. So how do we stop this?
Yeah, but see, I think a lot of, when we talk about, I mean, a lot of it has to do with our tone. A lot of it has to do with just being a reasonable person and knowing the facts. So if I talk about like the problems internally in our country that come from allowing mass migration on this scale to occur, well, I'm going to appeal to people on the right who care about that issue. But when I start talking about the humanitarian consequences of an unsecured border, when I start talking about the overall impact on the world and on the migrants themselves, well, all of a sudden I start to appeal to people on the left as well. And so I try to talk about both. And most people don't do that. You have the left just talking about the migrants once they get here and what they experience. You have the right just talking about the migrants who are here who commit crimes. But then you have this weird little hybrid thing going on where Breitbart, Texas tells the whole story. And the story is this, the things to focus on, it's like, for instance, up to 70 to 80% of the females from Central America who come to our border are sexually assaulted along the way, sometimes multiple times. That's a big deal. That's not just Breitbart reporting or Alex Jones. That is the United Nations. That is Amnesty International. That we could go down the line. You can Google it, sexual assault of migrants from Central America. And there's a Wikipedia entry that has tons of good literature for you and links for you to check out.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned that, because even the Washington Post has the headline that UNICEF and Amnesty International estimate 80% of women, Central Americans traveling through Mexico to get to the U.S. are raped. And how is that not a huge issue? How is America the bad guys and Trump's the bad guy and 80%? There it is, Huffington Post.
Yep, Huffington Post reports it, and it's not just Breitbart. And so that's what I'm trying to talk about. If we talk about the other 95% of their journey, not just what happens when Border Patrol agents apprehend them, but if we focus on how bad the system is and what we're encouraging, people don't realize that. Like Los Zetas and the Gulf Cartel, factions of those cartels, like the Reynosa faction of the Gulf Cartel south of McAllen, they make as much or more from illegal immigration as they do from drugs. You know, and so we're fueling, our kindness is fueling the very systems of oppression that people are fleeing from in the first place. And when you start to talk like that, right, when you don't call them animals, you talk about people just as people, you talk about their reality and the facts of the matter and what we're encouraging with this flow, you start to appeal to a lot more people. And so I think that that's the way that people on the left, not the entire left, but people on the left will start to come around is I think by talking about the migrants like they're human beings because they are, and talking about the realities of what we're doing and what we're encouraging. What we're encouraging is countries south of our border who will never get better. All of the talent, all of the courage is being sucked out to our country, and it's causing all kinds of problems back home. They need to stay home, and they need to fix their own nation, and we can help them fix their nation where they are. But this is the way that I talk about it. I find a lot of
Brandon, that's exciting. We know you've got big news at Breitbart, Texas coming soon. I'm going to break down the huge escalation of martial law and the threat of war in Europe with Russia when we come back. Brandon Darby, thank you so much. We'll be watching your reports at Breitbart, Texas. I'm Alex Jones with NewsWars.com. Stay with us.
That when the president gives the order, it must be followed. There's about 4 minutes between the order being given and the people responsible for launching nuclear weapons to do so. As president, I will make it clear that the United States will treat cyber attacks just like any other attack. We will be ready with serious political, economic, and military responses.
They're voting for peace on planet Earth if they vote for Trump. But if they vote for Hillary, it's war.
We came, we saw, he died.
With her, you'll end up in World War III.
I want the Iranians to know that if I'm the president, we will attack Iran.
Right now, Senator, for us to control all of the airspace in Syria would require us to go to war against Syria and Russia.
The U.S. military has just raised the threat level to DEFCON 2. Meanwhile, Hillary Clinton is still threatening Russia with military action following unconfirmed reports of further hacking. It's like she's not even concerned about the repercussions.
Of course not, because she's...
There's a really loud noise.
All right, looks like we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. We'll try to get Leanne back on in a few minutes.
When the president gives the order, it must be followed.
Ladies and gentlemen, the so-called president of Ukraine has declared martial law several hours ago. And when you've studied the geopolitical history of Crimea, of Ukraine, of Russia, and when you've looked at the different angles of it, it is extremely clear exactly what is going on. The president has declared martial law, and the president of Ukraine and he's now saying that he is looking at suspending the elections that are upcoming that polls show he's set to lose. So you've got Crimea, part of Russia for 500 years. It's where Russia was founded, 550 years or so. You've got Ukraine that historically, its eastern part is Russian. Its western part is more Catholic and more allied with Germany and Poland. And if you look at the history of World War II, Hitler occupied Ukraine. And then Ukraine fought on the side of the Nazis against Russia. At least the western part did. So there are big beefs between Russian Ukraine, that's Orthodox, and Western Ukraine that's mainly Catholic. Those are the main fissures. 5 years ago, George Soros and the United Nations and NATO publicly bragged that they overthrew the elected government of Ukraine and actually put an interim government of Nazis that actually Heil Hitler. The interim vice president actually Heils Hitler. You can pull it up. Now think about Soros. He went on Fareed Zakaria and said, yes, I am behind overthrowing Ukraine. I did a good job. I got the $5 billion State Department money. I do it. I did it. Would you like me to pull the clip up? When I helped the Nazis round up people, it was best time of my life. Happy making time. No, I feel nothing bad about it. After all, it's like markets. If I not do it, someone else do it. I mean, these are real quotes. So I could talk for 5 hours just about the history of Crimea, the history of Russia, the history of Ukraine, just because I've studied World War II, World War I, and basic history. Now, if I was Ukrainian or Russian, they'd say, let us really tell you. And they've got two different perspectives. And there's no doubt that Stalin did a lot of brutal stuff to the people in Ukraine and that they use it as a breadbasket. There's no doubt that the Soviets looted the hell out of their own people and their neighbors. You know, famously, Russian serfs said, you know, the czars took everything, but at least left us with our lives. Stalin kills us. But then again, after he sent millions to slave camps and killed millions, there were only folks left that would go along with it. They kind of had their own social score, their own social credit score. Do what you're told or you're dead. So there's beefs on both sides. But make no mistake, Western Ukraine is more allied with Europe, Western Europe, and the Catholic Church. Eastern Ukraine is Orthodox. And if you're a radio listener, I'll try to describe this. For TV viewers, you can see it bigger than Dallas. There is a world map blown up to show Crimea. That is a peninsula of Ukraine, but also a peninsula of Russia with only a tiny little waterway open, kind of like an intercoastal canal in Galveston, where the Russians have built a bridge. Now, Crimea is where you have the genesis story of the Russian Empire and the czars and all of it beginning more than 500 years ago. And Russia has fought more than, you can debate what's a war, what's not a war, but dozens of major conflicts and wars over Crimea because it's such good farmland and it's where Russia began. So it's part of Russia. It's incontrovertible. There's no debating it. It's an absolute fact. And you've got Russia proper only less than a mile away from Crimea. And Crimea is where they have their big gas lines coming out of Russia and coming out of Ukraine and then going to Europe. And it's the port that they have in that major sea. And then you've got this major bay that is where the Russian Navy stays out from the weather. You park your ships in a protected bay. And that's the Sea of Azov. So you've got the Black Sea, and then you've got the smaller sea where they keep their ships and they keep their main navy for the Black Sea. So imagine, that's basically like their naval Pentagon on the Black Sea to project power into Georgia and Romania and Bulgaria and all these other areas. And the Islamists are all trying to invade through there. And so there's 100-year-old treaties and there's 15-year-old treaties from 2003 that say when you come through that strait, the Kerch Strait, when you come into Russian-controlled waters for 500-plus years, you have to call ahead, say who you are, what your vessel, your tonnage, what you're carrying. Then a pilot boat from their Coast Guard, just like we do here, and just like England does, and just like South Africa does, and just like China does, comes out and tells you, go on this bearing and follow me. And sometimes they might want to search your cargo, you know, if you're coming in from North Korea. Or maybe Iran, maybe something suspicious. Maybe they're going to say, we're boarding you. And, you know, the Coast Guard, I've been boarded before when we were out in New York City back in like 2005, out on some guy's yacht. A listener brought us out there. And we were driving around the Statue of Liberty at night and up pulled the Coast Guard with their machine guns. And they said, we're going to look at you. They kind of checked, said, okay, have a nice night. Don't drink too much. Imagine if they pulled up and said, stop. And we went, no, and said, screw you. Well, they would, and then we didn't stop. They'd ram us and board us. If that didn't work, they'd shoot our rudder off. It's standard procedure. That's what happened yesterday. And now martial law has been declared. They're suspending the election, and NATO's talking about a full-blown war with Russia off of this ridiculous made-up provocation when they tried to sail their attack ships in to the middle of the Russian harbor and more. Ladies and gentlemen, we are seeing a massive crisis unfold in Ukraine. yesterday, attack boats with heavily armed men with rocket launchers and heavy machine guns went into the controlled port area controlled by Russia for more than 500 years in a major provocation. Here is some footage of that unfolding when the Russian Coast Guard rams one of the boats that came into the controlled port without authorization.
Лево 5, лево 10, стой машина! Стой машина! Есть лево 10. Лево на борт! Есть лево на борт! Руль лево на борт! Назад! Назад, блядь! Назад! Даю назад! Давай, блядь! Давай, блядь, держаться всем, блядь! Сука, блядь! Лево нам держаться! На борту!
And there's footage of at least 3 boats, heavily armed, that came in to the admitted Russian-controlled waters. They have multiple treaties that you have to have authorization to come in, as you do any port, especially a military port. If you did this to a military port in the U.S., there's a good chance you'd get actually attacked with a phalanx minigun, or that you'd actually have your hull fired upon. But the Russians did ram that ship. They did shoot the rudder off, several others, because they wouldn't stop moving in towards the bridge that the Ukrainian government has said they're going to blow up. But now, the big news is here that the leader of the Ukrainian government has declared martial law and says he may suspend the election. That is the huge takeaway. So there's the image of attack helicopters flying around, fighter jets, and our own media, Fox News, CNN, is the Russians, for no reason, out in international waters in the Black Sea, attacked some ships for no reason. No one knows why. Why the ships always just go through that Kerch Strait out of the Black Sea into the Russian port, and we have no idea why the Russians did this. Meanwhile, the Russians had to put an oil tanker cargo ship in front of the opening to protect the bridge, because you had more attack boats coming up towards the bridge, which the president of Ukraine has said he intends to blow up. Because the Russians have always controlled Crimea, which is a peninsula of Ukraine. It's where Russia started. Russia is right by that and has always had control of Crimea since before Ukraine existed. This is a fact. This is in the history books. This is in the encyclopedia. But if you point this out, you're a Russian agent. You know, if the Russians came over to Western Ukraine and, say, attacked Odessa, which has never been Russian-controlled, then I'd say that's wrong. They didn't. It's their port. It's their area. And then here comes these boats who refuse to talk on the radio. By the way, this reportedly went on for an hour. Went up to 10 boats. Only, 4 of them got taken, and 20-something sailors. And here come Ukrainian commandos following their orders to come up, to not talk, to come towards the bridge, and then have the Russians freak out for an hour because they wouldn't respond until they got the order, ram them and board them. Let me tell you something. You do that with the Coast Guard, you'd be boarded in 3 minutes flat. By the time they got up, they would start shooting your rudder out from 500 yards away. They would never come up close like the Russians did. This is extremely restrained by the Russians. You pull that with the Coast Guard, your rudder's getting blown off. You know the Coast Guard's blowing ships up every day, right? Drug runners, you name it. I mean, you pull up to British waters like that, they're not even going to shoot your rudder. So this is going to start a new war. We've got the footage of the fighter jets and the helicopters and all the rest of it. Look at that armed boat. It's got like your M60 machine gun right there. M60 style machine guns, 3 of them right there. To back that up, I'll show you. And imagine when they pull up to these boats, the men all get inside. They're ordered, go out there, drive under the bridge, refuse to answer them, and when they come, hide inside. Now the Russians have no idea what's going on. That's why the U.S. Coast Guard would have shot the rudders off, which they did do to 3 ships, and not rammed them. They wouldn't even see that minigun on the front of that Russian boat, though. You see, that's exactly what our boats have got of that size, in major harbors. They would have sunk that ship in many cases in the United States. They'd shoot the rudder off, the people didn't come out. Why endanger a boarding party? Sink the ship. And then that's what they do. First you warn them, then you shoot the rudder off. If people don't come out with their hands up after about 5 minutes, they then aim at the water line at the back of the boat or the front of the boat as to not kill people, but to put a hole in it, and you start sinking the boat. And usually people come out at that point. If they don't come out at that point, you then start shooting more holes in the boat and you sink it. That's standard naval procedure for, again, about 500 years worldwide. You ever been on a cruise ship? You pull up anywhere in the world, out come the harbor boats, out comes the harbor control, because there's ships coming in from the whole world. There could be weapons, there could be smugglers, there could be drugs, there could be kidnapped kids, there could be bioweapons, you don't know. And so you pull up, you say who you are, and they may decide to board you. It's a border. So Ukraine sends a bunch of attack boats into the harbor at the main Russian naval base after the Ukrainian president's been threatening to blow it up, and then the people hide inside because they know the Russians are going to start shooting. And that's exactly what they got. And now they want to start a wider war and ship more weapons in and, quote, take back areas of Ukraine taken by the Russians, when it's George Soros and the globalists. On record, George Soros is on CNN saying he did it. Overthrowing an elected government, the country goes into civil war. Joe Biden's son is out of college, given control of the Ukrainian gas company, makes hundreds of millions of dollars a year off of it himself, and they start seizing Russian facilities in Crimea, and so the Russian military went in and wiped them out. And there's an ongoing war with 30, 40,000 dead. You hear on the news 10,000, it's way more than that. There's little green men, Russians, all over the eastern part of the country now. And it's getting worse and worse and worse, and there's U.S. advisors and U.S. military now there. And we're on Russia's doorstep, where Russia was starting a war with the globalists running our country that want to destroy our country, and the EU's licking its lips to loot Ukraine, implode Ukraine, cut Russia's main export of gas off, which is an act of war. What would we do if well, it was actually 10, but the Russians only grabbed 4. If 10 Mexican patrol boats with machine guns and rocket launchers pulled into Galveston Harbor and started driving towards the naval base there, what do you think the Coast Guard would do as they drove in for 20 minutes from the 12-mile markers, saying nothing and not responding? Exactly what the Russians did. The Mexicans would do the same thing to us. It's standard procedure. But they think you're all stupid, and they're trying to start a new world war. You know, here's an example of how I'm covering news, reading foreign news, U.S. news, you name it. The media is reporting that there was a standoff for over an hour when up to 10 different boats tried to go through a waterway out of the Black Sea into a Russian-controlled port under treaty that, again, borders Russia proper. And then the crew pointed out that actually it's reported that the standoffs began 15 hours before. So there were standoffs like an hour apiece with some of the ships, but the whole fiasco started 15 hours. And again, what is this smoke screening for? Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, BBC, Sky News. This is getting almost no coverage in the world. I didn't even know about it till earlier it was pointed out. Syria gas attack sparks Russian strikes. The rebels have been caught repeatedly launching chemical attacks and then trying to blame it on the Syrian government. Well, now it's happened again, and the Russians have struck it. You'd think you'd hear about a gas attack, but because the rebels are clearly the ones behind it, no coverage here in the U.S. Russia's carried out airstrikes against Syrian rebels it accuses of launching a chemical attack on the government-held city of Aleppo. Both Syria and its Russian allies say shells carrying toxic gas injured about 100 people late on Saturday. State media showed images of Aleppo residents being treated in hospital after they struggled to breathe. We'll go watch those videos. Because in the past, the rebels have done real attacks on themselves, but also on areas they hold, but also they've staged them. So who knows? This whole thing is a circus. But is this latest attack obviously so they can suspend the elections coming up and so they can declare martial law in Ukraine, which has now happened? Is it also to cover up this big story? More than 100 hurt in suspected chemical attack on Aleppo, but almost no coverage here in the United States. The reason this is so important is George Soros is funding U.S. Antifa. And George Soros helped overthrow the Soviet Union. You can say that's a good thing. But he's kind of the leftist intelligence operative, kind of the figurehead of all this. But when you overthrow the elected government of Ukraine, and when he's promoting basically communism here in America, that's not a good thing. And it now threatens a wider, larger war. And remember, I got sued by the University of Georgetown, which is owned by the Catholic Church. The Vatican sued me and falsely claimed that I said some individual, who I didn't even really know who he was till he sued me, saying that I said he killed the girl that got run over. No, the guy that ran her over killed her. We were pointing out that Antifa is funded by the Soros Group on record. That's been in court. The documents are public. That the police stood down. And that the neo-Nazi group, all three leaders, a year before had been Democrats working for Obama, Hillary, one of them's dad, high-level government, leftist, open borders group. Now suddenly, these guys that basically look like the college drama club dressed up in 1930s Nazi outfits are walking around with torches. Now, that's not the same Nazis or, quote, alt-right, as Hillary calls them, from Charlottesville. That's Ukraine. That's the group 5 years ago that overthrew the government, shooting police and others. They actually Heil Hitler. And it turns out, it's been confirmed, that it's funded by the very same leftist groups. Isn't that funny? So, see, we hit a little too close to home when we pointed out that Soros is caught funding these groups. Hell, he said it on Free Zarkaria on CNN. So it wasn't caught. He said it. And now it's coming out in all sorts of foreign newspapers, you name it, that there were Western white supremacists trained by the same leftist groups over here who were then sent over to Ukraine. So, see, all we said was, man, it's crazy how you get a bunch of Antifa and a bunch of leftists all mad. You get them out there, you bring the white supremacists, when clear evidence shows it's actually a cutout group, to then project onto Trump and the American people. And then the police make everybody march into a big group. There's a melee. A guy gets scared, drives his car into a woman. She dies. And then all conservatives are blamed to be Nazis and for killing the girl. And then I get sued saying that I'm saying this specific guy killed the woman. I never said that. I never even thought that till I got sued and it said that. But see, being sued now makes you guilty. You're no longer innocent until proven guilty. Work your mind around that. I'm not saying a camera guy killed a woman. We did point out he worked for the State Department and for Hillary, and you know, it was a bunch of leftists out there covering the melee, obviously so that if there was violence, it could be used to, you know, trigger a demonization of the right in general, which is what the left admitted they wanted out of Charlottesville. So here it is. It's out of Consortium News. U.S.-funded neo-Nazis in Ukraine mentor U.S. white supremacists. And that's the neo-Nazis from Ukraine funded by Soros on record. Short-sighted U.S. foreign policy that backs jihadists in the Middle East and neo-Nazis in Ukraine is once again blowing back on the United States, Max Blumenthal explains. Just try to get him on the show. And this is what we're saying, is that radical groups are getting funded by Soros. And if you look at the three leaders of the white supremacist, new alt-right, whatever they are, that when you look at these people, we've had them on the show. And I'm like, a year ago, before all this, you worked for Obama. You worked for Hillary. Well, yes, but I've changed my mind now, Alex. Ha, 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 ha. It's the oldest trick in the book. And then you create a climate to have the people clash, and out of that, you get the national crisis. And now it's starting to come out in lawsuits. It's coming out in court cases. It's coming out in federal filings. And this is incredible. And that doesn't mean every leftist or every photographer, every group out there is involved. The media has a spectacle. You've got a right-wing racist group led by the globalist. You've got the left-wing Antifa led by them. We've got documents where they talk about staging provocations and staging events. That's what they do. And then everybody else shows up from the left and right. There's a big melee. An innocent woman gets killed. And Soros is to blame and the globalists are to blame for creating the climate. It's like you have a chemistry set. You put two things together, you know we're going to explode. The chemicals themselves aren't conscious or guilty. They were just induced to be there, to be put together for there to be an explosion. How do you change the subject from that? And George Soros funding Antifa? Well, he just files a lawsuit to change the subject. That's what they do. And it's another provocation, ladies and gentlemen, to take us off the air by misrepresenting who we are and what we stand for and what we do. Now, I want to get into the Chinese social score and how deep the rabbit hole goes on that when we come back from break. But I do want to just tell listeners here that all the specials you saw last week with Black Friday specials have been extended for at least another 2 days with the store-wide free shipping, 50% off on the supplements, double Patriot points out of 5 points, 10 points towards a future purchase, 10% off when you sign up for auto ship on things like coffee or X2 or X3 or Supermobile Vitality or anything you're going to want to reorder, DNA Force. This is the biggest, best sale we have ever had, period, at InfoWarsStore.com or 888-253-3139. And we have a lot of limited edition T-shirts that are really awesome. So many different variants. Some of them will just help you meet like-minded people. Some of them will get you hit in the head with a bike lock in liberal areas because they're so liberal. The point is, choose your own adventure. It's great to spread the word. So, survival gear, super high-quality storable foods, all of it. And the big special, the huge special, on Alexa Pure Pro, the biggest, best gravity filter out there, stainless steel, normally $247. It is now $127. We're getting it at cost from them because they need to move it out for inventory into the year, but there's only a few days left. They're about to sell out. InfoWarsStore.com. A lot of great deals, and your purchase makes it all possible, so thanks for the support. Now, Paul Watson has put an extremely powerful piece together, really showing you the latest developments on the Communist Chinese so-called social score that is really the mark of the beast, total tracking system that if you associate with Christians or Buddhists or gun owners, even in America, you will have your score lowered until you literally starve to death on the side of the road. But meanwhile, the fact that this is being brought in by Google and Facebook and others in America, we first broke this 5 years ago. Next year's news today. That's a non-issue. It's all, did Facebook scrape some political data and use it? Their big crime is they were only 90% Democrat slaves. They let Republicans do some of the same stuff. Meanwhile, Google reveals plan to monitor our moods, our movements, and our children's behavior at home when you bring the Google Assistant in. And so is Amazon's Alexa, and so is Facebook's. Precisely what I told you 20 years ago because I had NSA sources that they were already planning this. But that's not the issue, we're told. No, ladies and gentlemen, it's all what Zuckerberg's done because there's a hostile takeover by George Soros of Facebook. He's going to drive it down to nothing, then take control of it for a political weapon. That's why Trump must act now. Internal documents Facebook has fought to keep private obtained by the UK Parliament. Meanwhile, they're coming out with toilets that monitor everything you do and track how high-tech toilets could soon be tracking your every movement. Yahoo News, AP. That's not a big problem. It's only Facebook did something 1/10 as bad. Let's go to Paul Joseph Watson's report.
Nobody does authoritarianism quite like China. By 2020, every citizen will have a social credit score that will go up and down based on their personal behavior. Behavior leading to a deduction in credit will include jaywalking.
You are crossing the road. Stand back. Like, oh, sounds reasonable.
Driving, smoking on trains.
Dear passengers, People who travel without tickets or behave disorderly or smoke in public areas will be punished according to regulations, and the behavior will be recorded in the individual credit information system. To avoid any negative record of personal credit, please follow the relevant regulations.
Buying too many video games, buying too much junk food, buying too much alcohol, calling a friend who has a low credit score, merely having a friend online who has a low credit score, posting fake news online, criticizing the government, visiting unauthorized websites, walking a dog without a leash, letting your dog bark too much. At least in 1984, Winston Smith could take a train to temporarily escape the surveillance state that he labored under. In China, low-ranked citizens will be prevented from taking buses, planes, and trains.
我现在是已经被限制这个自由的出行了，就是订票啊，我们高铁和飞机都不行。
This man's not allowed to travel 1 inch.
这个 APP 来
And he shows them the app. They use the apps and smartphones to control you.
从重庆到西安，我们来订一张票，订一张。
But in America, they're going to get us to opt in by being trendy.
然后就显示那个出票失败，说我已经被法院依法限制高消费，限制乘坐金字头列车。
Now, where have I seen that before?
That's reserved for members of our Prime Flight program. You got to be a 4.2 or over to qualify.
Oh, I'm a 4.2.
By the way, we broke all this before Black Mirror.
I'm afraid you're actually a 4.183.
But Black Mirror's cool, though. We're not. We're just deplatformed being totally on target.
Can't you just... I'm sorry, it won't let me book it without the correct ranking.
6.7 million Chinese people have already been prevented from buying air and train tickets, and the system hasn't even been properly rolled out yet. The punishments for citizens whose credit score sinks too low are limited only by the imagination. Renting a house, getting a loan, booking a hotel, filling up a car with petrol, all will be restricted.
I can't buy property. My child can't go to private school, he says. You feel like you're being controlled by the list all the time.
Good behavior will also be rewarded by green channel benefits, free perks, discounted loans, fast-tracked visa, university and job applications, VIP airport access, faster internet speeds. Dating websites are even offering users with high credit scores better visibility on Tinder-style apps. The loyal informant will be well taken care of, and the entire system will be overseen by an estimated 400 million surveillance cameras with facial recognition software.
Cameras record them going through intersections, zero in on their face, and then publicly shake screens.
And it will eventually encompass real-time geolocation tracking of citizens via their cell phone. Overall credit scores can go up and down in real time based on a person's behavior, but it can also be affected by the people they associate with.
2 stars? 2 stars?
Wasn't a meaningful encounter.
Everyone is a little bit heightened and false because everyone's terrified of being marked down because the consequences of that are unpleasant. So it's basically the world we live in.
And all this will eventually be unified in a centralized database. In the words of the Chinese government, if trust is broken in one place, restrictions are imposed everywhere. They literally say that those deemed untrustworthy will be, quote, unable to move even a single step.
一个人如果信用不好，我们实现的一个目标就是让守信者通行天下，让失信者寸步难行。
When you ask Chinese people about social credit, most of them say it's great. Gee, I wonder why.
I think it's a good thing, this woman said. It makes people more honest.
我觉得这种东西应该更加多一点。
我倒觉得挺好的。
Could it be because under that very same social credit system, they will be punished for criticizing the social credit system? But social credit isn't just about behaving yourself. It's about marshalling the behavior of others, the prisoners guarding the other prisoners. The Chinese government just doubled the reward for reporting the illegal publishing of pornography. I'm not going to work today, wrote one potential porn buster on Weibo. I'll look everywhere for materials so I can report anyone who I find disagreeable. There's money to be made in reporting, so what am I doing working myself to death? China already has a spy program to rival the East German Stasi. In one area of Beijing alone, Chaoyang, there are around 120,000 paid informants in operation. Once social credit kicks into high gear, so many more thought criminals will be detected that all those Uyghur Muslims in Chinese re-education camps are going to have a lot more company. The Uyghur minority is already forced to download an app that reports their entire browsing
let's hit pause here.
And real-time location.
The full report's posted to the front page of InfoWars.com. We'll put that on screen so I give you the actual title. And it goes on for about 3 more minutes. It's very important because then he shows how it's being done here. But here, it's going to be even more arbitrary with SJWs trained by Soros. This is Associated Press deciding what your score is. China's terrifying social credit system. Now, it's already operating in the West. You can override the censors, but we make it easy. NewsWars.com has not been put in all the databases as banned and as evil. Most libraries, Boeing Corporation, the Pentagon, InfoWars.com is blocked. A lot of Trump's Twitter is blocked as well. There's traitors in the government. But you can go to newswars.com where this has been posted and share that URL. And we're going to start creating more and more almost URLs of the week where you can share the content and not get the negative social score. That is people blocking you, demonizing you, attacking you, and get the information out. But there's no doubt where all this is going. It verifies everything we've said. We've been dead on. And that's why we have to be shut down, because we've been proven to be so incredibly accurate. The Bible's been proven to be accurate. It's happening. So I want to thank the listeners for all their support, all their prayers, and what you've done steadfastly to back InfoWars, because I'm proud of what we've done. I'm not starting other websites and other things because I'm ashamed of InfoWars. It's still going to be the big mothership. We're doing this to give you tools for now to get around the system while we fight to have Congress and the president and others move against the real tyranny. The EU and the Democrats aren't going up against Facebook because it's tyrannical. It's because it's not tyrannical enough and they don't fully control it. And it's a red herring distraction from all the real stuff that's going on that's 50 times worse. I'm no fan of Zuckerberg. I'm not defending him. Soros is trying to take it over right now. And they're using some little flimsy thing as the excuse. Soros started paying a year ago to have people that work at Facebook leak them info so they could twist it and spin it. This is an example of what a monster he is, and the consortium he represents, what monsters they are. We're going to go to break. We have a great guest host, Owen Benjamin, always informative, the band comedian. He will be hosting the 4th hour coming up. And please don't forget, Cyber Monday means all of Black Friday specials last week, our biggest sale ever, is extended for just a few more days. Free shipping store-wide, 50% off all the supplements and other huge sales, and double Patriot points at InfoWarsStore.com. Please support us. You are our only hope. Well, a fellow thought criminal, one of the top national comics out there, banned off every platform you can imagine, Owen Benjamin, is going to be taken over after this quick break in about 5 minutes. And then, of course, the War Room's coming up 3 o'clock Central with Owen Schroyer, Roger Stone, and others. Sitting back here looking at these headlines and looking at how suddenly Facebook is the big evil group because of some of the spying and data mining they've done. And meanwhile, all these other groups, Google and others, are light years ahead of it. And Amazon uses the Alexa in your house to listen and watch and track everything you're doing. And now in federal cases, with all these home assistants, the judges are ruling, yeah, give us your history. And it's everything since you plugged it in, even when it's off, recorded. They're using them in murder trials. It's beyond 1984, way beyond. And again, I first had NSA whistleblowers on 23 years ago, and they laid everything out. And that's why I was the bad guy. Oh, there's going to be a world government and a social score and everything you do being tracked and on and on and on. And now it's all here, and that's why I have to be blocked and taken off the air everywhere. Now, speaking of censorship, I wanted to get to this before Owen Benjamin comes on. Iraq war vet who called out social media censorship, booted from Twitter. He's a talk show host in Houston, ran for Congress. They won't even tell him why he's been booted. See, the new thing is They don't even tell you why you're booted. With me, they made up some stuff. And now a feminist that said men are not women, she's been booted. If you say the sky's blue, you'll be booted. Iraq war vet who called out social media censorship, booted from Twitter. Here's a clip from Tucker Carlson before he got banned where he predicted it.
So you wrote this piece that I thought was really compelling about Alex Jones, and you said, look, I don't agree with Alex Jones's views, but that's not the point. The point, as you articulated, was if you can silence this guy because you don't like what he says, why can't they silence you or me?
That is the point, Tucker, and they're coming for you and me next. Alex Jones was the weak member of the herd. Because of his insane views on certain things, they knew they could pick him off, and what he was a test run. If we can pick off this nut job, then maybe sooner or later we can come for the more mainstream voices on the right. This is not the social media, Facebook, Twitter, that's 2.5 billion people they reach. People have to understand it's no longer a couple of nerds sitting in a college dorm room swapping stories about a made-up.
Let's stop right there. I want to get this guy on because I want to debate him. I want him to tell me what I said that was kooky and was wrong. He'll probably quote mainstream stuff, you know, like Mars bases. I never said that. But at least he said, hey, the weak member of the herd, dude, 6-7 billion views on YouTube, hundreds of radio stations, TV stations. But see, he feels powerful. Weak member of the herd. But it is true that they chose me to build a straw man weak member of the herd to then take me down so people wouldn't defend me. And then once they didn't defend me, they wouldn't defend the next person. And by the time they ban everybody else, everybody's sick of hearing it, and we've accepted it. That's the plan. But I just love how people always have the proviso, oh, I don't agree with him. He's a terrible nut job. You know, when I criticize somebody, I say what it was they said that was wrong. You see the difference? We'll be right back with Owen Benjamin. I'm Alex Jones, newswars.com, InfoWars.com. Spread those links.
All right. I'm live right now. That's awesome. Hi, everybody. My name's Owen Benjamin, and I am guest hosting for the next 54-ish minutes here on InfoWars. And today, the first thing I want to talk about is obviously the mainstream media's distortion, why they do it, what motivates them. Specifically, Jim Acosta, I've had a slight obsession with lately. And so we shot a trailer for a movie that would be in Jim Acosta's head. I sent you guys the video. It's called what's it called? The Warrior or something? And if you guys want to play this, it's pretty funny. It's called Reluctant Hero, the Jim Acosta story. So let's watch this, and then we'll talk about what goes on in these journalists' heads. Jim Acosta.
They say the pen is mightier than the sword. Just remember, rookie, when everyone's tweeting in one direction, you tweet in that direction.
It's called trending, right?
Yeah, pal. It's called trending, all right. Only the mightiest of men can wield the pen. And that's when I realized that if there were no guns, there would be no crime. Hey, baby, it's me again. Yeah, I know I haven't been around in a while, and I've just been really busy. You know, I've been hanging out with the Property Brothers a ton and Aziz Ansari. I just want to let you know I miss you, and I was thinking about you. A true hero is not made in war or battle, but on the internet with words. Did you get that selfie I sent you with Morning Joe? Even the greatest warriors have a breaking point. All I ever wanted is to work for CNN. I'm one of the good guys. Can one man listen to a chant? Just please call me back. That he sucks? I think the future of journalism. I don't know what journalism is. Or is that the breaking point of all men? All we ever wanted is to be a blogger or a panelist, just like our dad.
All right, so that seems like an exaggeration. Obviously, it's comedic, but that really is how a lot of these guys see themselves. They see themselves as actual heroes when, in fact, they're cowards and they don't represent anything heroic at all. So Why do they do this? I think there's been a massive long-term degradation of art and beauty in our culture to get to us, to get to the point where we can't identify what is good or bad. And I think that Jim Acosta and all these people are the wizards that do it. They reframe everything to move. Okay, Caitlyn Jenner was Woman of the Year. Okay, so we have a 65, 67-year-old guy that has mental issues, you know, with just like a screwed up face and just on hormones, just ran a woman off the road to her death. And so we take this distortion, it's almost like a Salvador Dali painting, and then we show it to everybody and say, this is the best woman. And so the people, granted, a lot of us wouldn't get on board that, and that's why I'm not allowed to perform in comedy clubs anymore. But enough did that the controllers or whoever's at the top of responsible for all this felt a little better about themselves because they know that people are one step closer to believing and doing anything they're told. If you agree that Caitlyn Jenner is the Woman of the Year, you'll agree with anything. And these are those purity tests that came out in 1984, like say there's 4 lights when there's only 3 lights. All right, so how do they do this? Ask yourself, can you name one band that's awesome that's came out after 2012? I can't. You can't name one. They're all DJs. They're all they're regurgitating past art and making it worse and then throwing it out there for your consumption, because the problem with beauty is beauty inspires. You know, heroism inspires. So you take Jim Acosta and you make him out to be this hero, a guy who just this deranged special boy that thinks he deserves all the questions, and he pushes lies just to get America into another war. Check this one out. All right, here's another sketch we did. You guys want to play that sketch with the audio?
Mr. President, will you come on Russia? Mr. President, are you causing the hurricanes? I'm not going anywhere, sir, until you respond about Stormy Daniels, Mr. President.
It's like they're framing this guy whose questions are all proven lies as a hero of free speech. Well, people like me, Alex Jones, someone else just got banned from Twitter that's ridiculous. They frame us to be these outlier, dangerous people when in fact, we're simply doing what we want to do. We're free people thinking freely, speaking freely, and trying to inspire ourselves, our family, people that listen to us. And that is actually the problem. It's not about saying something that's vulgar, because you got Louis C.K., you got all these guys saying horribly vulgar things that they had no problem with those guys. It's about demonstrating that you're not willing to say nonsense for money and power. I sent you guys another article. I want to show you guys how the media works. It's very, very tricky, but I think I cracked the code. If you want to show that image of the Netflix article, I actually fell for this today. They actually tricked me, and I'm not that easy to trick these days, but they got me. You guys got that image of the Netflix article? Oh, thanks. It's the basic gist is it says Netflix responds to controversy about underage nudity. And of course, I jump on that and post it, and I'm like, these people should be in jail because I'm horrified by the normalization of pedophilia these days. And then I saw what they were really doing. And you got to see if we can't get the image, that's cool. I can describe it to you. But it was like a 16 or 17-year-old trans boy. It's a boy dressed as a girl, trans. And so there's a scene when that boy was shirtless, which isn't nudity. And so they started a debate based on the premise that that's a girl. And that's why I took it down. I'm like, they got me. They tricked me, because that's how you move the frame. You say there's outrage today, and they never say who's outraged. People aren't outraged about Alex Jones or me. They think we're hilarious. Okay, look at this. Netflix, yeah, that's a dude, right? So what does the article read? what does the headline read? It says Netflix, they start a false debate. Netflix battles film director over underage frontal nudity. Okay, if you engage in that debate at all, you've accepted that that's a girl and not a boy. That's how it works. It's kind of a sales technique, but it's like a satanic sales technique where if you say how many children, people are outraged at the number of children Hillary Clinton's allowed to eat. If you debate that, you're already saying that it's okay to eat children. I know that's an extreme example, but it's not really that extreme when compared to this story. So they take a boy, pump him full of hormones, dress him up like a girl, probably do some sort of surgery, ensuring that they'll be, childless, and now in a mental category of 40% suicide, which is higher than the prisoners of Auschwitz. And then they say, oh, we have to protect the nudity of this girl. Aren't you outraged? And that to me is that's wizardry. It's straight cold wizardry. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about what they're doing with the border and the wizard tricks they're doing there. And I got another sketch for you guys, because that's some high level witchcraft. At least they're pretty good at it. Just I would have preferred if it wasn't so evil, awful. What's up? Yeah, that was a hot baseline, man. That was getting me in a good zone. And I'm gonna throw out my website, hugepianist.com. I'm on tour in December. Denver and Phoenix just sold out, but we got a bunch of other dates. You want to check out privately produced specials that didn't have to go through the Netflix. I don't even know what I'd call it. I picture Netflix almost being like that meat thing from Pink Floyd's The Wall. All right, anyway, so let's talk more about the media and what they do, because I've been fascinated with this my whole life, because my mom teaches children's literature, like how to boil down like a really great story, and my dad teaches rhetoric and public speech. So from the time I was a little kid, I've been getting taught some of this stuff, and I never thought that it would be so relevant to my life as it is now, because we see the media doing just such psychotic wizardry, like just high-level propaganda. And so let's talk about what's happening right now at the Mexican border. Okay, so right now we have a border between America and Mexico. And that border is very necessary for America to exist, because just like, who said it? Chesterton said, morality is like art. You have to draw a line somewhere. I always like that quote. And it's the same with nations. If you don't have a line, you don't have a nation. And the left, these leftists, these Marxists, globalists, communists, whatever you want to call them, they have a worldview where there is no lines. Postmodernism, moral, subjective reality, my truth, my feelings, I feel, all that stuff is designed so that no one has to designate anything ever, and you can just acquire as much power and candy as you possibly want. And so what we're seeing now is CNN backing this nonsense, because the way they frame the world is very important. And this first picture I'm going to show you guys is what was on the CNN website. And it shows a woman and her children, and they're running, and it looks like there's tear gas. It literally looks like a war zone. That's a cropped photo of a larger photo. And I'm going to show you that larger photo. And here we have, that's the exact moment that I just described. For those of you just listening, you see camera people standing around, a ton of males jumping a fence. She appears to be the only woman with children that isn't just standing somewhere. The gas bomb or whatever is pretty far from her and not really near anybody. And we can see how this looks like a reality show set. There's literally camera people everywhere. So they're trying to get the one frame that has women and children in it just to appeal to usually female sensibilities, because women usually think more short-term about care. I have 2 children under 3. My wife typically has the worldview of whatever is going to help them right now. And that's why we survive as a species. God bless mothers. They're like, whatever's going to help these 2-year-olds, that's the answer. Men usually think long-term, where you think, okay, well, if we open our borders just because one 2-year-old is running in a cropped photo, many more will die. So it's the more long-term approach. And together, the male and the female, the two approaches, make for a pretty stable, beautiful, wonderful society. I see a role for both. But now that we have this media that's trying to stoke the fires within that female instinct of just protect children at all costs. And bear in mind, statistically, a lot of these kids have been kidnapped. They're being human trafficked. I think 80% of women that are coming into America illegal are raped on the way. So there's nothing humanitarian about what's happening. So why? Yeah, exactly. Like these pictures are designed to make people feel empathy. And that empathy is weaponized because empathy is not a productive quality. Compassion is kind of like empathy mixed with logos, you know, where you can not physically feel what someone else is going through, but you can have compassion for your fellow man and help and contribute to your society. I'm not saying to be a cold person, but empathy is a weapon. So you have media that try to traumatize people with images and with emotional triggers so that they don't make the right decisions. And right now we're seeing that with the border. And it's getting to the point where the masculine and the feminine are being so divided in this country. And some females have seen past it. Many females have seen past it. Usually women that are married with their own children can see past the nonsense. There's a lot of males that have fallen for this in this white knight fashion where it's like, I'll save you. And so what is going to be the result of it is just an even more divided nation, and a nation that can't address its problems head on. Like, if you can see my hair, I kind of look a little bit like a lesbian Wolverine, because for a while now, I don't like getting my hair cut because the hairdresser, it's a dice roll as to whether or not they're going to hate me. Because when you're sitting in that chair, one of the first things they say is like, hey, so what do you do for a living or whatever? If I'm like, I'm a comedian, they're like, oh, I love comedy. I love Trevor Noah and Amy Schumer, and wow, those people are so funny. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, do you like those guys? I'm like, not really my cup of tea. And then I start saying who I think is funny, and then there's a silence. And then I realized that someone who believes that I want school shootings to happen and I want little kids to be gunned down at borders, they're that close from my neck with a blade. And so that's why I've been having my wife cut my hair, and that's why I look like lesbian Wolverine. So what the media is accomplishing right now is dividing the country in a way where it's not about shared goals. Because back in the day, maybe I was delusional, but I thought that Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, libertarian, anarchist, we could all argue about stuff because we all assumed that we wanted what's best for America's future. You know, back in the day when I'd argue with my father about stuff like that, because my father's more on the left, and I still know that we have similar goals, but I knew that he still wanted the same stuff as me. We're now facing a world where I don't trust that a leftist wants the same world as me. I think there are people that truly want only police to have guns, no nations, little children can choose their own genders. Like, that to me is it's not like a discussion. It's not a debate. It's like, you're my enemy now. Because it's one thing to say, socialized healthcare will solve more problems. If you believe that, I think you're wrong, but you may still be a very good person, and we're still in the same country, and we'll debate it and we'll figure it out. If you think that a child should be given the option to take hormones so they become infertile, there's no debate there. It's not like, what's the best way to get to a good world? That's simply someone saying that they want what I consider to be hell on earth. So in response to that, I'm still going to do comedy and tour and do specials and whatnot. And if you want to check mine out, go to hugepianist.com. YouTube.com/Owen Benjamin Comedy. I'm currently banned from live streaming, but I live stream on another channel and then upload it after. I'm not going to stop. What's up? What's going on? I'm digging these the music intros. So this segment, I wanted to talk about what is drawing a certain type of a person to the safe space mentality, because safe space is the new selling tool of socialism or communism. The safest place you can be is solitary confinement in a supermax prison. That's a true safe space. That's, you have walls, you have bars, you have a meal plan, health insurance, you name it, all provided by the state. The safe space is a prison. So that sale of safe space, what causes it? I believe that it's caused by this bizarre societal abuse that we do to children, puts them in a position where they are seeking safe spaces, which is government control. And I used to think it was ridiculous when I'd hear a 20-year-old soy addict tell me that they had PTSD. And as someone with a lot of friends that have come back from Afghanistan, and I know what real PTSD looks like, I would always think that they were insane. But I'm starting to understand that there is a type of PTSD that does come from public schools that just keeps making you just remember facts and not how to get to the facts. Like, you don't learn how to learn, you just learn a bunch of facts that mean nothing and just recite them. It keeps you in kind of this weird state. And then on television, you watch a never-ending amount of violence and pornographic type scenes, and the media just keeps you scared. So when you grow up in that environment, especially if you don't have a stay-at-home mother, and you're raised in a situation where there's a high level of abuse, you constantly are seeking safety. And so I made a comedy sketch, because that's kind of what I do. I'll take these like complicated and somewhat dark concepts and make them funny, because it's easier to kind of reveal with humor. I think there's two types of humor. There's humor that reveals evil, and there's humor that normalizes evil. You know, the left with Netflix and all this stuff, they figured out this formula where they can take comedy to make things that are really dark and awful seem acceptable. And then there's also comedy, and this is the comedy that's banned currently, that reveals the problems with society and the evils of society in a way that's a lot more palatable than just saying all this stuff to people. So here's a sketch I made. It's called The Last Bernie Bro. And I hope you enjoy it. The Last Bernie Bro. Just trying to...
My name is Chad, and I'm a Bernie Bro. There used to be millions of us. Then there were thousands. Now there's only me. We stood for something greater than ourselves, equality of outcome. The greedy capitalists called us morons, said we didn't have jobs and we lived off our pants. I mean, that's all true, but they did not have to say it like that. When I first heard Bernie Sanders, something in me changed.
You know, it's funny, sometimes American journalists talk about how bad a country is because people are lining up for food. That's a good thing.
I knew that the problems in my life were not my fault. They were someone else's fault. Capitalism, greed, America, not me. Everyone else turned on Bernie Sanders. I did not. Bernie spoke of a land that listened to him and had the courage to follow the dream. I couldn't find it on a map or spell it, but I knew it had carried his dream and I would find it. I brought only my machete, a frisbee, bubbles, 2 La Croix, and my trusted vape pen. The natural environment is raw, beautiful. But when I think about white privilege and America and capitalism, I flip out on it, just beat the shit out of it. Greedy capitalism makes me freak out so frickin' bad. My name is Chad, and if you are reading this, just know there is hope for you too. Come. The socialist utopia Bernie Sanders dreamed about. Escape America's evil, rich clutches if you dare and try to break into a dream. The dream that is Venezuela. My name is Chad. I'm here. I want to come in Venezuela so bad, and these walls divide us. Please, just open your gates to me.
You want to come in?
Yes, please.
Like in here?
I've come all the way through this horrible jungle from America to be a part of your beautiful utopia. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter.
You're an American.
A lot of shame, I know. The land of greed and meanness. I want equality.
Do you have a passport?
Oh, of course, the shameful document that keeps people apart.
Let me see.
I'll burn it right now.
Wait, no, stop. Stop it. Put it down. Put it down. You wait right there.
Okay, I'll do anything. I can't wait to play Frisbee and blow bubbles.
Is that valid?
Unfortunately, yes.
All right, pick it up slowly. Hand finger. Hold this.
Well, but why would I want
freedom? Hold this.
But why would I want a gun in a land of utopia?
Stay right here.
But aren't these illegal?
No, take back!
Where are you going, sir?
I'm going to America!
Man, that man's very confusing. Who are all these people running towards me? Why do they look like skeletons? Hello? Where do I play hacky sack around here? And who has some goddamn La Croix?
All right. So now that you just watched that and you're like, wow, that was super hilarious. Where do I see more of that guy? Hugepianist.com for self-produced specials and tour dates. But so the point of that is that this type of person that can't seem to think for themselves, it's because of just this constant training, this constant trauma from the media and the news to get to the point where they can live in a constant state of cognitive dissonance. Why would people be clamoring to get in America if America truly is this awful place of inequality and socialism is great? Right now in Venezuela, they had so many children that were starving to death that instead of doing something about it, they just made reporting that illegal. Venezuela has gotten so low that the UN is now calling it a failed state. And that's the UN that is currently pushing a globalist agenda. Venezuela is supposed to be like a success story, that they came in with socialism, they centralized everything, and they went from having some of the highest oil reserves in the world to just becoming just a mess. It's debatably the most impoverished country in the world now because socialism always ends in starvation and genocide every single time. So how did they get these people to think that America is so bad, but yet we should let these people into our country to save them? Save them from what? Save them from their utopia of centralized planning without these awful white male, cis, straight capitalists to ruin their life for them? That's such an obvious contradiction that I realized that it isn't based on someone not understanding it, or maybe I can just explain it to somebody and they'll see it. It's a permanent state of cognitive dissonance that they can't seem to snap out of, and that's why they're called non-player characters. It's literally like a drone army. It's one thing if you have issues with policy or whatnot, but you can't say Donald Trump is literally Hitler, now give your guns to Hitler. You know, you must submit to tolerance. Like these statements can't exist in a healthy mind. So the only way out is to raise good kids, keep on eating, keep on working, and just really hope that we can just avoid these people because they're super annoying. They're just a lot of soy. All right. What's up? I'm back. I'm back for another segment. And as you can see, the light continues to change on me because the sun is setting over some beautiful mountains. I'm in the Adirondack Mountains up in northern New York. Just had a great Thanksgiving. Very thankful. The whole family came together and it was awesome. And I just wanted to touch on a point that talking about this stuff and thinking about this stuff and thinking about why people do what they do, and as evil as it can get sometimes, it's actually relaxes you, because I really thought about this. I'm like, am I stressing people out? Is it going to hurt people's health to talk about some of this stuff? And if people just want to relax and ignore it? For me personally, and I'm sure a lot of you agree, that the most anxious I get is when I have no idea why someone is acting the way they are, because I can't predict anything about the future. So as dark as some of these conversations can get about how these abused people grow up needing a safe space and vote in socialism and all that stuff, at least we know the causes, and it's not just random. Like, for example, when I used to live in Los Angeles, people started doing CrossFit, and I checked it out, and it was literally just people like moving tires and just swinging like hammers on tires. And as someone who's done a lot of hard labor jobs, I'm looking at this and I'm like, so you pay them to just do work? You know, it literally looked like you're just helping someone move. And people are like, yeah, CrossFit. I'm like, how much do you pay these people? And then I finally understood that people who believe in nothing, like the atheist nihilist mentality of Los Angeles, it's not that they believe in nothing, they would believe in anything at that point. So they're just constantly looking to fill themselves with some new meaning, even if it's literally moving a tire, that I would demand at least $20 an hour to pay me. And then me and my brother were joking about that we're going to start CrossFit construction, where, you know, here at CrossFit construction, you pay us $100 a month, and we meet with the homeowner and we just complete these construction bits that we're going to make the money on. CrossFit can redemption. If you want to be redeemed, you bring us all these cans for the nickels, $100 a month, you know? And people would probably really do that. All right, so now what we're going to talk about is we're just starting talking about Bernie Sanders and socialism, why the government keeps expanding and why the laws keep getting more ridiculous. And it's a pretty basic idea. So I wanted to put it into a dramatic form, and I went out into the real world, and I did this sketch that I'm going to play for you guys. And by the end, we'll talk about why the government seems to keep expanding. So check this out. I hope you enjoy it. I enjoy it.
What should I look for when starting a small business?
My top one would be hiring great employees.
I need compassion because I don't want an abusive place, but I also need someone willing to hurt people.
Some of our best employees are like retired school teachers who
that's a good idea.
They know the books already and
so I should find like retired drug mules.
There you go.
I used to be a police officer down in Virginia.
Oh, sweet.
And we worked in the county lockup.
What are the pitfalls of prison life?
The pitfalls are what comes out of the cell is the most dangerous. Poo or food. You want to steer clear of that for sure.
They'll throw poo at you?
Oh, yeah.
Do you worry about insurance with your new prison? Because one of our big expenses for us is insurance as far as...
I have insurance. His name's Gary. He owes me a favor. So I'm doing customer outreach because, you know, you're kind of a squirrely little guy. I figure there's a good chance you're going to end up in prison one day. If you end up going to prison, what do you want out of your prison?
A bed.
How about pets?
They gotta have a nice breakfast.
Waffle makers? Because when I'm on the road and I'm at a day's end and I'm like, oh, no way, it's a waffle maker. That makes up for the semen in the bed sheets. One thing I found about this area that I'm starting to really resent is the low crime rates. Because I took my family from LA to be in this beautiful place, and I'm trying to start this prison, and the last thing I need is the fact that no one commits murder. Right now, cops are very discriminatory because they're usually only going after criminals.
That's right.
Oh, man.
Video games full of crime. Shooting.
Okay, so why don't you go out and do it for real and not be such a coward? I read on some hippie website that 1 in 3 black males will end up in the prison system at some point in their life. That seems low to me. How do we get those other 2 guys in there?
So you have certain classes of individuals that are known as protected classes.
Right.
Minorities, people with disabilities.
People whose brother is Ben Affleck.
Things like that. Yeah, that's not your market.
So 22-year-old white females. Because they already probably are having a hard time finding a job.
Hey, 3 squares and a bed at 22?
1.5 squares and a mat. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Everyone's going after dudes as prisoners, right? Because they're committing all the crimes.
Right.
But I want to get you guys in there. How do I get more women?
Well, you create laws against things like indecision.
Because then when you got chicks, just like, because every time I see a woman, they're always just doing this. Lock them up. I want to expand the prison industry because I want to make more money. You know, look at those eyes. Like I wake up every morning and he looks at me and goes, Dad, do I have to go to state school? Like the scumbags? Look at him in the eye and tell him he doesn't deserve everything his heart desires. Now help me out and let's get some white chicks in prison. Once I do this business plan, what do I do next?
You gotta execute it.
Execute. No, I don't want executions. I'm actually against capital punishment.
You are.
Because there's no capital in it. Big sodium pentothal is killing little guys like me. I don't know, this might be a bad idea to start a prison. Maybe I should just do a coffee shop.
Coffee shop.
It's really gonna be a prison.
Yeah.
Welcome to my home. And I got a special surprise for you at home, potential customers. Just kidding. No, for real though. Okay, yeah. This is my very own prison with my very own employee, Tom the guard. Always asleep, always hammered. Good guy. Good guy. And here are my first two customers, right? Who wants some waffles? We have the Saranac Lake Strangler, convicted on a technicality. And we have an indecisive white girl, 3 to 5 years, no possibility of parole. I'm just here to support my family. You know, I'm living the American dream. And as long as private where's the Strangler? You didn't see where the Strangler went? We're gonna have to get you to your mom's house. Good Lord, what have I done?
All right, so I probably should have prefaced that with the title of it, but it was called Owen Benjamin Starts a Private Prison, a mom and pop prison. Because the whole point was, if for some reason if prisons can be private and if you want to start your own prison, what's the first thing you do? You want more customers, which would be more people in prison, which would require you to have either a more unsafe society or more laws. Because if you're paid by how many prisoners you have, that's what you'd require. So when you see the state continuing to expand, that's the point. And when you think about the Democratic platform is that they help minorities and women. That's everything they talk about. It's just, we're here because we're not racist and black people everywhere are like in a lot of pain and they're suffering. So if you run a business, what's the one thing you don't want to happen? You don't want to lose your brand. If the Democrats' brand is helping women and black people, the worst possible thing that can happen for them is black people and women making more money, being more safe, having more freedoms. Because at that point, I'll tell you a quick story. My mom was in this thing called La Leche League when I was a little baby about breastfeeding. And women would all get together and they'd breastfeed babies and talk about sore nipples and pumps and all this stuff. And back then it was illegal to breastfeed in public, and they were trying to overturn that law. So long story short, they do, everything's awesome. La Leche League doesn't go away though. I just looked it up recently, and now they call it chest feeding, because now that they accomplished what their goal was, they need more customers. So now they're into trans guys. Can't make this up. I sent it to my mom. She was fairly devastated as to what had happened to La Leche League. So you create this sociopathic organism, anything like this. It's the same thing happened to the Defamation League and all this stuff. It starts off great. They have to accomplish a goal. And then once they do, they have to just keep going and growing and growing. That's why we have to keep freedom to the individual and the family, because we're the fail-safe. We're the off switch to this growth. Because these organizations don't have a heartbeat. They don't have a pulse. Corporations comes from corpus, which means body, but there is no body. It's vampiric, right? So the only way to survive all this, the government, corporations, things with no pulse that have appetites, is with the individual and with the family. And as long as we keep that in mind, we can just keep on being American and awesome. But if we lose that, I mean, it all just starts falling apart. But I think that's going to be it for me. I hear the rock and guitar acts in the background. So if you want to keep in touch, youtube.com/OwenBenjaminComedy, hugepianist.com. And again, it's been an honor hosting the show. I'll see you next time.
Our team is always looking for new ways to improve our products. That's why we've created the newest version of a fan favorite formula, the Real Red Pill Plus. The Real Red Pill Plus contains the powerful pregnenolone formula, now with an added energy boost. Now, you can support your heart, brain, and aging process with an added natural energy boost. The proprietary energy blend includes powerful ingredients like green tea extract, yerba mate leaf extract, and more, paired with the powerful ingredients in the original Real Red Pill formula. The Real Red Pill has just what you need to support your body while getting the pick-me-up to get you through the day. The Real Red Pill Plus is a powerful investment into the future of your mind and body. Don't miss out on the all-new upgrade to your favorite product. Head to InfoWarsStore.com and get the Real Red Pill Plus today. Real Red Pill Plus is on sale now while supplies last.